We're going to get started. My apologies for being a few minutes late this evening. So I do want to welcome everybody to this evening's general meeting of March 29th. So we do have an agenda. We'll call the meeting to order. We have a council attendance as well as acceptance of the agenda. Rules of order. We'll go through the follow-up from the last follow-up action items from the last general meeting of March 1st. We have an update presentation on a membership review presentation by consultant Donnie McDonald. A presentation on the tobacco pilot project, terms and conditions for the final agreement, done by the Department of Health in Mohawk. Presentation from the IFN youth on a conference in which they attended during the March break, as well as we'll provide an update on the land claims, an update on the Akwesasne election law, and we'll also provide an update from council on some funding options. We'll entertain business from the floor. We have a resolution and we'll make announcements for the next general meetings. Next district meetings. Could I have a motion to accept the agenda as presented? Steve, seconded by Connie. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. So we do have members. Chief Loran as well is on travel this evening, and Chief Troy Thompson is out sick. So as it's been our regular protocol that for every general meeting we hold a moment of silence for the members that we have lost over the last month. We do understand that we have had some members again this evening we have lost as well, so I'll ask for a moment of silence in honor of those we have lost, and condolences to their families. All right, thank you very much. And on behalf of council, I extend our deepest condolences to the families affected by loss over the last month. Okay, so I'll take a moment to go through the general meeting rules of order. So this evening's general meeting will start approximately at 6 p.m. We'll go till 8 p.m. At which time we will acknowledge whether or not the conversation is going past 8 p.m. If permitted, we will go a bit longer. Personal issues will not be dealt with in a public forum or this general meeting. So personal items will be dealt with on an individual basis. We will take it back outside of the general meeting. If you have any questions or comments during the meeting, please raise your hand and wait to be acknowledged by myself, and I will take a list of speaking order list, call upon you when it's your time. We ask that you please keep your questions relevant to the subject matter in which we are talking about. So there is a time at the end of the meeting, business from the floor, to talk about items abroad. So we ask that you please keep your questions centered to the discussion. And a list of issues that cannot be addressed at this meeting tonight will be taken back, and we will provide follow-up for the next general meeting and answer those questions that we can't answer this evening. As well, we note that our general meetings are recorded for other community members who are not able to join us this evening. So there is a line of sight here that the camera is on. We will not record any of the community members here. We do ask that if issues are addressed regarding the Mohawk Council, that you not address individual names of the Mohawk Council. You can address the chiefs by name. But if you're calling on a program manager in the Mohawk Council, we do not want to use their name, simply for their protection, that they are not here to address those things. We can talk about the positions and we'll determine if it's appropriate to talk about here or one-on-one. Also, the general meetings are for members only. They're designed for members of who are members of the community under the Akwesasne membership code. So they're not for people that are not members. We have in the past had people attend our meetings that are not members, which sometimes becomes problematic. Those are our rules of order for this evening. I will proceed with the follow-up items from the last general meeting of March 1st. So we did have a general meeting on March 1st, which was the February general meeting. So a follow-up, the Singers Mohawk Tribe and the Mohawk Nation Council of Chiefs regarding the Haudenosaunee Grand Chief reiterate the position of elected council. So we have a leadership meeting scheduled in early April, and at that time we can have a conversation with him about the letter that was brought forward at the last general meeting that spoke to the position on elected councils for the Haudenosaunee. So the second follow-up item is a follow-up letter to the Ministry of Transportation, Ministry of Indigenous Services, Ministry of Crown Relations with regards to MCA's position on surplus lands. So our office is currently drafting that letter and will be issuing that letter. That was with respect to reminding the ministers that they have a duty to consult with us when disposing of surplus lands within our claim area. The third item is follow up the trust regarding amendment process. Chief Soshi looked after this, so an update that council was advised that any members who had a question with regards to the trust can do so by dealing directly with the trust. They can speak to the chairperson, Francis, or email the chairperson at akwesasnetrust@gmail.com, or by phone number, or by mail, sorry, which has been listed. These items are all in your packages, which are at the back of the room as well. Fourth item was a follow-up of OVS and the Council of Elders regarding criteria for a residency permit. So that is that's a separate handout at the back. It didn't make it into the full package, but the information has been provided to you. That is a criteria of what the Council of Elders use for residency permits. As well, follow-up, number 5 was follow-up by a community member regarding our issue with CBSA, and Chief Soshi has followed up directly with that community member. So that is our follow-up items from the last general meeting of March 1st. So now we will turn to our first presentation and update. So the Mohawk Council has undertaken to do a review of the Akwesasne membership code, the Akwesasne residency law, as well as the Council of Elders. We have hired a consultant, Dr. Dolly McDonald of the Denny's Research, to assist us with that. We had launched an online survey as well. Some focused meetings are happening with respect to membership, because we want to be able to ensure that the membership as it's operating now, membership board as it's operating now, is meeting the objectives of the community, as well as all the mechanisms that support the Akwesasne membership board and the law itself and regulations. So Dr. McDonald is here this evening to provide us with a quick overview of the project itself, and to offer, to meet with community groups that want to talk about membership, specifically to provide feedback, which will then form part of our report. So Dr. McDonald, I'll ask you to come forward.
So
I'm here.
And I will remove myself out of the way so people can see the screen.
Well, there's no presentation.
how are you? Are you in front of me? Oh my goodness. Hi everybody. Okay, so as the Grand Chief said, I'm a consultant in the community here, and I'm doing a membership review for the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne. And basically the purpose of the review is to, address some of the increasing demand of applicants that have been applying for membership. And so there's been identified a need to enable processing of applications in a more efficient and timely manner. And so it's kind of a two-phase project. The first part is to look at the membership code, the residency law, the charter of the Akwesasne Membership Board, and the rules and administrative guidelines. And then I've also done a literature review and looked at membership and citizenship from a national perspective. Also, part of my responsibility is to look at the membership board, the powers, the duties, the responsibilities, accountability, and transparency functions, and then the pros and cons of the current policies and procedures. And also to look at the organizational structure and community processes. So, as the Grand Chief mentioned, there's several parts to the study. We started in January, and I'm going to September. And so I've already started to do focus groups and engagements. I was at the district meeting here in Ganadago earlier this week, and spoke about membership and what are some of the issues that are important to the community. And then I've also done individual interviews with the OVS staff and membership staff. And so the next part of the study will be looking at like what is the information that we're getting and what are kind of the trends of issues that are being identified. And then there'll be a report that I'll be doing probably April or May, and that'll kind of summarize what I found through the interviews and through the focus groups and the engagement. And then there'll be some discussion about whether maybe the membership code needs to be revised. You know, maybe there needs to be some new sections or changes. So that would be another piece of it. So, and coincidentally, once we got started on this project, about 2 months into it, we found out that there was some money available from Indian Affairs for a collaborative engagement design study. And basically, it has to do with Bill C-31 and Bill S-3, which is persons that have been able to come back on to enrollment that may have lost membership through marriage or through enfranchisement. And so there's been changes in Ottawa in terms of that Bill C-31 and Bill S-3. And so the federal government is obligated to work collaboratively with First Nations to identify what are the main issues that are related to membership, and then how would we want to be engaged. So that report will be going to Indian Affairs actually next week. And so part of the reason I'm here, I do have some questionnaires that I would love to have you fill out. And it really basically talks about what are the main issues that you're interested in. Yes?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you a question. I've been to a lot of the membership meetings.
Yes.
And one main question I have is that the registration of an Indian, registered in Ottawa in the registry department.
Yes.
And plus versus your membership code that came out in June 1987.
Yes.
So according to the Indian Act of 2018, it still states in there, Section 5.2 of the Indian Act, that prior to April 17, 1985, prior to that, if you were registered as an Iroquois of St. Regis, that nothing changes. And even in your, your self-government now, part of your self-government also states the same thing. That
yes.
Prior to April 17, 1985, that you stayed the same. It
yes.
stays the same in registration. So what does the registration of Indian Affairs, because I went up there last year and I asked them, I said, and one of the chiefs recognized the fact that we had this question. So we went up to the registry department on 10 Wellington Street and we asked, what are we registered as? And they printed out a form and it had our 4-digit band number on it, not 10-digit. And it says you're still registered as an Iroquois of St. Regis.
Yes.
So it had my parents on it, it had my kids on it. So it says you haven't changed it. You stayed the same prior to April 17, 1985.
Yes.
So since your code came out 1987 in June.
Yes.
So what's that do with the people that are registered in Ottawa as an Iroquois of St. Regis, but yet they're saying under the membership code, we turned you over and now you're a Mohawk of Akwesasne. So in memberships, what do we follow? Because, you know, the membership code says, oh, you have to be a member, and they change everything accordingly. Because if you remember, in 1985, a resolution was passed for identity change. It was set up by a chief of council. So my question is that you're saying the membership, I'm not saying this to be, you know, to open up a whole can of worms, but it is a good question. Mm-hmm. So we went and we asked, can we take our status card? Can we have our status card with our 4-digit number that we were born into? I was born in 1955. So we were born into that. And our parents are on it, our grandparents are on it, our children are on it. They were both born in the 70s. So we're all registered as Iroquois of St. Regis. Now you have a membership code of 87. So my question is, like, what are you're saying you're a member. Well, according to the membership code, you took us and put us under Mohawks of Akwesasne. But yet we're still registered as Iroquois of St. Regis. So it's just something I wanted to bring up to look at because it's still that way now. You go up there. And you can't have a membership code and have people say, okay, we went door to door and we decided we're going to have a membership code, because every Indian has a right to self-determination, self-identity. They can't change it unless you decide to change it and say, I'm no longer an Iroquois, say, Bridges, I want to be a Mohawk or Akwesasne. They can't flip it that way. So it's just a question, like, if you have more meetings or something, I'd like to go to the meeting and if you could look up and see, you know, what versus what.
Well, you know, fortunately, the project has been extended to September, so I'm going to have more time to, you know, go into the different districts and have more meetings like this where I can talk to people and ask what are the main issues. Because I think your question is a very good question, because kind of something I've started to learn as part of this project is there are two kind of classifications. And, you know, as you're saying, there's the band membership, which is the membership with the Mohawks of Akwesasne, but there's also the status.
Indian registry.
Well, yeah, and so there are two different things, like in 1987, like you mentioned, there's the Bill C-31.
85.
Yeah, well, yes, in 85. But there was a cutoff time for Indian Affairs in 1987 where they gave all the First Nations in Canada the opportunity to write their own membership codes. Yeah. And so those that wrote their own membership codes had the ability to have their own you know, control over their membership, whereas those that didn't, and there are some that didn't do membership codes, they are under that Indian registry that you're talking about.
You see, that's why I say that Canada can be challenged.
Yes.
Because what they did is absolutely wrong. If the Indian Act, 2018 Indian Act states in there that prior to April 17, 85, that you are what you were registered as an Indian when you were born, is an Iroquois St. Richard. So when the membership came out, even the self-government, I brought this up with Mr. Darwell, who's leading the self-government, and he mentioned it there, and I brought it up to him, and he didn't have an answer, because their answer is also anybody prior to April 17, 1985 who stayed the same.
Yes.
So I never changed it.
Yes.
See what I'm saying? So
yes.
That's something that I really like to look into.
Yes, well, and actually that's the reason for this collaborative engagement that Indian Affairs is endeavoring, because, you know, again, there's the impacts of Bill C-31 and the impacts of Bill S-3 and C-3. And both of those are where people, that, especially women that married off reserve, they can get, you know, re-enrolled because of Bill C-31.
The big argument we have is that as an Indian, you have the right to self-determination.
Yes.
And self-identity.
Yes.
So to take that identity and roll it over into something else, you know, they have to contact the Indian, and you have to be on board to change it.
Well, and that's the whole purpose of the engagement. You know, as I said, I'm kind of doing two studies. The first one is the membership review that's looking at our own membership board and our, you know, the membership and residency laws that we have. But the second part of it is that bigger conversation with Canada in terms of, you know, what are the impacts of Bill C-31 and Bill S-3. And, you know, because what it means is there would be more people that would be eligible for membership through Indian Affairs. Maybe not through our board, but through Indian Affairs. Because like you're saying, there's that difference of status and then band membership. And the rights that go with either one are different. Like
we called the Indian Register down on 10 Wellington Street. We said, bring her down. Her name is Natalie Neptune. And we asked for her to come down and explain all this, and she wouldn't.
Well, it's a very controversial and contentious issue, and there's, you know, again, part of the work that I've been doing is looking at the case law. You know, there have been First Nations that have taken Canada to court to challenge, you know, their jurisdiction or their perceived right to decide who's going to be members of our communities. And so it's very important. And I'm glad you're raising that question, because that's kind of why I'm here today, is to kind of ask, you know, what are some of the burning issues, you know, in this room in terms of what, you know, band membership, like you know, say cross-border issues would be another big thing for us.
If you could, you know, look that up and see when you have your next meeting or focus meeting, come and maybe we can talk about it.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, continue, please.
Okay, so anyways, so there's a little survey that I have, and I'd like to leave it with you, and maybe you know, it can be turned back in, you know, at the end of the meeting. Because this report that I'm working on for Indian Affairs is asking us, and it's a very, very important opportunity because this legislation is going for royal assent, and it's our opportunity to bring the issues forward. And we're probably one of, well, we are the most unique community in Canada because of the border issues. So, like say for example, and then maybe you can tell me yourselves, like some of the issues that they've proposed that they're going to be talking about at the national level are the categories of Indian registration, which is what you were just talking about, the band membership versus the status membership. And then issues related to adoption, and then issues related to enfranchisement, and unknown or unstated parentage, cross-border issues, voluntary deregistration, the rights of children of same-sex parents, and then the role of the federal government in determining Indian and band membership under the Indian Act. Because they have that authority. Like if there's someone that applies for membership here and they don't qualify, they still could go to Ottawa and get band member, well, status. And the difference is that with status, they would get rights to health benefits and, you know, education benefits. But full band membership here includes all of the other things, you know, housing and rights for burial and social assistance and all of those kinds of things. So those are some of the topics that have been raised. But if there's something else that any of you think, you know, we should mention to them, then, you know, like if you can bring it up now, or I'll leave the survey with you, because I have my report's due April 2nd. It's actually due March 31st, but March 31st I think is a Saturday, so they gave me till April 2nd. So again, if you think of, yes?
Can anybody prove to me that they're Mohawk? Can they prove it? Anybody?
Well, it depends, and again, that's a part of this research, is, you know, how do you define? Is it blood quantum? Is it half? Is it quarter? Is it full? You know, is it residency? Is it, can you speak the language and know the culture? Like there's, you know, a whole bunch of definitions that they use on the national level to say this is what a First Nations person is. We can, you know, in this community, we can decide ourselves what we want a Mohawk to be. Yes?
Yeah, another question I have is, do you have anything in that questionnaire to do with people that are non-reserved, that are not registered as a member?
Yes.
Not registered, like, is there an enforcement in there to have them removed from the community?
Well,
if they're doing wrongdoings or meetings or anything like that, like to be a member, there should be an enforcement if you're not a member. It's the police's job to remove these people from the reserve, right? So is there anything in there with enforcement?
Yes, yes. The Grand Chief mentioned that we did an online survey, and we had it online, I think it was from like March 2nd to about March 19th, and it was on the Mohawk Council website, and we got about 300 responses to that survey, and that issue was one of them in terms of, you know, applying for residency, you know, what are the rights that you get as a resident, and then one of those rights, one of those obligations is, you know, law-abiding citizen, and, you know, yeah. So I don't know, like we did this survey quickly because of the fact that I have to have the report to Indian Affairs by April 2nd. But I mean, it's possible that we could open it back up again, and because I have till September to do, you know, the first study, and you know, and then also, you know, it has been raised that we have the questionnaire online. But I mean, in a forum like this where we have a, you know, a focus group, we could, you know, talk about issues in the survey, you know, in a group session versus just online, because I know not everybody is on Facebook or, you know, on the internet. Yeah.
Okay, we have about another 5 minutes.
Yes. So the other part of it that, and I just lost my page. Oh, here it is. So the other part of kind of why I'm here today is the other piece of the report that I have to do for Indian Affairs is to tell them how we want to be engaged. Like, because they go around the country and, you know, they're talking to First Nations about membership, and some ways of engaging are different and work better than others. So, you know, we have the opportunity, for example, to have community meetings. We have the opportunity to do more surveys. You know, we have the opportunity to have a referendum or key stakeholder interviews, which is kind of what I've been doing, some research studies or a conference just on membership, or dialogues, like, you know, bringing in some lawyers or, you know, bringing in some experts to talk to us about, you know, what are the implications of, you know, Bill C-31 long-term, and what are the implications of Bill S-3 in terms of, because we're already stretched in terms of land and housing and all that kind of stuff. And so, you know, and then also maybe just some information sessions, because I think there's a lot of people in the community that don't really understand the distinction between, you know, band membership of the Mohawks of Akwesasne and status. And I think that's, you know, a real important thing. So that's kind of it in terms of my presentation. I do have surveys that I'd like to leave with you, and then maybe you can turn them in to, so, you know, yeah, to Carla, and you know, give me your ideas and your feedback. So thank you. Yes.
Question over here.
Just a comment, a quick comment. Would there be any dialogue with Mohawk Nation or the tribe and their versions of membership within the community? Because all of them have different things, and if we're working towards one community concept, there should be some dialogue on that front.
Well, I think that's, yeah, I think that's an excellent idea. That actually did come up in the survey. And again, because I have an extension to September, I'll have the time to engage with them, and that maybe can be facilitated by, you know, the council. So yeah, I think that's a good idea.
We're doing a membership that's coming up in April. We're at the casino. There's a certain body getting together to discuss these issues, like what was presented today with the different changes in the membership with INAC. Also, the government designates you as an overall person. And we're reaching out to the nations and nation council chiefs, ourselves, Ganawagi involved in this, and we're reaching out to the Ganawagi side of the traditional councils and also municipality to get together to find out and read these interpretations and these definitions in order for us to get out information to go at them and see and compare and see how we perceive it, and then present it to them, and then get all the information that we presented to them and see how we can compare it to make it more that we can see.
So that summit is part of the Iroquois caucus that we're looking at developing. Is not part of that, but the conversation is obviously the same. So what Dolly has presented on is 2 studies. One, that she's doing a review for us of the Akwesasne membership board and the processes in the Akwesasne election law and the Council of Elders, which all encompasses membership and supports, you know, who the process in which we determine who's a member. And the other part is the INAC part, is that as the government of Canada looks at rolling out legislation to amend Indian registry, they want to know how they can engage with communities. So the first part is just how do you want to be engaged, and then to kind of give a highlight of some of the issues that may be with respect to the legislation. So there are kind of 2 parts that she's doing. The one that we're really focusing on is the review of the existing structures in place, because that is what is empowered on the Akwesasne membership code. That is what the community wanted, and we want to review it to make sure that it's reflective of modern day practices and it meets the needs of the community. So that's what she's assisting with, 2 projects. So. But as we move forward, we will inform the community of specific meetings on membership, so she can gauge your thoughts exactly like we raised this evening, the question about registry. She'll do some of that research and hopefully report back at one of the meetings.
So you're also going to report on the election law?
She's not, no, but we will after, yes. Yeah, so this is only specific to the membership review.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that update. So we're just going to do a switch of the presentations for this evening, if you don't mind. Jim, we're going to ask you to go first before the tobacco pilot presentation. So I'll look to Chief Tim Thompson to give us a bit of a background on this presentation.
The Akwesasne is part of the Independent First Nations in Ontario, of which there are 12. And the Independent First Nations held their 4th annual youth conference up in Shoal Lake 39, Kenora area. And we did a call in the community for interested youth to attend the conference. Last year we sent 10 students, 10 youth, and this year we sent 5. And they are here to present their presentation on what they participated in and their findings. So we'll turn it over to this group and we'll let them introduce themselves.
General manager, so it's fine. Yep.
My name is Languise Edwards. I was the MC and also delegate representative for Akwesasne for the 4th annual IFN Youth Conference.
Sego everyone, I'm Kaylee Jocko and this was my 3rd conference with IFN.
Sego, my name is Caroline Burns. This was my 1st conference. Sego everybody, I am Kylie Lazor and this is my 1st year with the conference.
Sego, I'm Diana Guatzliosta and I went as a youth representative on the youth council. And this is my 1st year going.
Cool. So, today we're just going to have a conversation with everybody who are present and who are not present here, talking about the details of our journey there, since we had a good, was it 4-day? I think it was 4-day event, and then of course if you add the travel time, it was about a 6-day total adventure for all of us. And of course we're going to talk about the learning experiences, the things that we did in particular, and of course to share our personal stories that we've had. So, you want me to talk about how they...
Yeah, they asked you to MC one.
Yeah. So a little bit of this cool little idea how I became the MC, Mr. Edwards. That picture up there, if you can't see that. Last year, I went to the 3rd annual IFN Youth Conference, and at first I was just a delegate at the time, but due to they had plenty of technical issues. They had, I don't think they had an actual good speaker at the time. There was a bit of scheduling conflict. I was there to offer my assistances, in which on the spot they're like, would you would you care to MC for us? And I said, well, why not? Sure. I'll MC. Yeah, that'll be cool, right? It was a total fluke, really. Like, I'm like, I plugged some chords together. I had a conversation. I held the mic, and I took the show, essentially. So, and then, of course, they, after that time, when the third annual was finished, they personally requested on the last day if I would be the MC for the fourth annual, which I did, and I'd like to hope that I did my job very well. And yeah. Everyone else want to tackle this one?
Talk about traveling? Okay. Well, traveling was a bit of a doozy. First, we got a vehicle that was just a little too small for us. What's it called? Traveling there wasn't bad. It was a bit of a stretch. We got there very late. I remember trying to eat dinner very late and going to bed. But other than that, it wasn't too bad. On the travel up, we eventually got 2 vehicles, so 3 of us went together, and me and my cousin Kaylee went with Joe Lazar. And we had an amazing conversation on the but we had an amazing conversation of like the history, some histories that we missed, that we didn't speak upon, like our learning through school. And what else would you like to add?
We just had a good overall trip on the way up to the, we had time, a whole hour to spend with one of the chiefs, and that was nice that they were going to drop us off at the airport and, just kind of getting us ready to represent our community while we were up there, and just giving us, pointers and stuff like that, and to just always be remembered to be respectful and to be in a good mind when we're talking about our community, and that just always reminding us that we are there to represent and to just be on our best behavior overall. So IFN makes sure that every conference that they host, that everyone walks away with a certificate and a training. And the training does take 2 days. The first conference I went to, I walked away with mental health first aid. And the second conference I attended with them, I walked away with family violence and prevention training. And this year, they always give you options between 3 trainings. So between all 5 of us, we were able to each attend one of those trainings. And I took healing complex from trauma, and it was land-based. And which one did you do?
I took first aid, CPR, and we did all of the lines of resuscitation along with general first aid. And yeah.
What did you do?
There was 3 of us that did the mental health 101, just the basics. So it was a 2-day. It was fun. We got to meet other people. Our presenter was actually from Six Nation, Brenda Johnson, and it was awesome to hear from other neighboring communities coming together too. So it was fun with that. What do you guys think about that?
In terms of the mental first aid, as Kaylee had just explained, it's a certificate program. Every single one of us, as delegates and representatives of Akwesasne, do walk away with a certificate. Now, I think some of ours were a bit different. I don't know if it was the same for the trauma workshop, but we have to do an extra step to go online, fill out a couple of things, and then it'll come to us via mail 3 to 4 weeks later. But regardless, it is a certificate program. So we were trained, and of course in specifics, in terms of the mental first aid, it was about helping people to cope with panic attacks, understanding, and of course seeing the warning signs of depression, and of course we learned of the fundamentals of algae, which is just a kind of a code of conduct of what to do and what to see and and what's your next steps when you're talking to someone who has these type of problems. And again, it was a phenomenal time. It was a 2-day exercise, and of course, we had a nice little table. We met with other community members, and we made friends along the way.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question as far as, I think it's a blood reserve. Is that Saskatchewan? I think it is. Alberta. They had 54 suicide attempts in 1 month. So there's a lot of things going on. So in your conference, meeting the other reserves and the other people, was there any conversation brought up on what they think about the legalization of the cannabis coming in a couple of months?
I didn't hear anything about that while we were on our trip. I know with IFN, they're constantly sending people from the IFN reserves to train in Safe Talk, which is suicide prevention. And I myself got trained in that with Sonny White. He's not here, but me and him are facilitators now. We not only took the suicide prevention, but we went to the next step to where we are trained to put on workshops. And I did do one in Akwesasne for AMB teachers and stuff like that. We did one in Ottawa at the Wabano Center from people all across Canada. And then I recently did one at SUNY Canton. So IFN is really big on the the epidemic of suicides and stuff like that in communities. And the Safe Talk training is a really, really good training, and it could be for anyone from 13 to, Dada's ages, you know what I mean? So we did get trained when we went to Ottawa. They gave us an honorarium and they covered our travel and stuff like that. But when it comes to Akwesasne, we made sure that we didn't charge for that. Whereas in bigger cities, they're charging a couple $100s for that certification, and it's a 3-hour slideshow, you know what I mean? But IFN gave us resources, and online you have to buy these resources in bulk, like up to 100 to 600, and it's a couple $100s for these packets. And IFN gave those to me when I got trained for free. So with those resources, the workshops that we're offering in Akwesasne, I'm doing free of charge, and just because it's our community, you know what I mean? So, and with that, anybody can take Safe Talk, and then the part 2 is Assist, and that's where they're able to do the workshops too. And you have to do 3 in a year to keep your certification. So IFN is really close with Safe Talk, and that's with Living Works organization. So they're really good with those, and we can travel to any community we want to, you know what I mean, depending on where it's needed. So I haven't gone any farther than Ottawa and Potsdam, but all these places that do have higher suicide rates, we could travel there if we open that conversation with people. Yes?
I have a question. You do a lot of workshops, you do a lot of training. So in the future, could that transpire into like a team who have all the same training, where you could have a crisis team, like several, not just one, but several people who are on a crisis team? Anybody in, not personally just suicide, but anybody who's having a mental health breakdown, that this team who is certified, who is young, who can relate, is that something that you're looking at creating in the future, is a mental health crisis team within Akwesasne for Akwesasne?
Yeah, that was one of the questions that I had myself, because once I got the training and the other trainings I have, I didn't know who else in the community had these trainings either. So I was going to go around and see who's trained, who has different certificates, and maybe if they would be willing to have their pictures posted places in the community, on a billboard, flyers, anything really, you know what I mean? Like a contact card, like stuff like that for when we have crisis and stuff like this, for places that aren't open necessarily in business hours, Monday to Friday, you know what I mean? If it's the weekend, if it's after hours, like not just that hotline number that, you know what I mean? Because usually they just have one cell phone that they pass around between like the agency. So I'm trying to find who has what training in the community, because there are a lot of people who have different trainings in the community that I would like to know, and I'm sure everyone else would too. So and you know what I mean, say somebody's having a hard time, if they've seen your face on something like a billboard, or you know what I mean, like a pamphlet, or just posters that we could put in our own Ganagwatlio, stuff like that, they'd be more willing to reach out to that person and know, like, hey, that person could help me, you know what I mean? So with all these trainings, I think it does have to kind of be put out there that we have them and that we're able to use them.
Would you also be willing to go into the area schools, the high schools? Because usually it's in that catchment, that age where that you're going to get bullied the most. People can't handle it. They don't know how to, like, they wouldn't go to their parents necessarily. So who would they go? So if these were based and would be going into the schools, let that younger generation see your face as opposed to be on a billboard. They can see you, they can talk to you, they can pull you aside, say, what do I do in this situation? There might be situations that they have or have encountered that don't want to say that it's for them,
but if they were to speak out to you and you're presenting to them, it would be a way of connecting with that student body.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into the grade schools, because that is where a lot of the issues are coming up. And we, like conferences like this, we went to Shoal Lake. We had to fly into Winnipeg, and then, you know what I mean, that's far from here. I would like to do a conference here with our own youth, you know what I mean? We've been to conferences. I've been to 3. I know how they work. I know a couple of speakers who would be perfect to come in and talk, whether it be in the LGBTQ community, whether it be with suicide prevention, like, you know what I mean? We are fully capable of doing that. We just need the resources. So that's just something I would like to do, is a conference here. And even if it is offering the Safe Talk training, because that could be done in one day, and that's 3 hours, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of opportunities. We just kind of need the resources and to get the ball moving with that.
Sure. So the ice fishing on Shoal Lake. Now this was kind of an interesting experience, given that during the winter times around here, there's times that you can go on the ice and travel on the ice. However, by the way, that was my slow-mo action right there. Look at that. I love it. And of course the casualness of this. So let me just run down actually the whole process of the day. So we wake up pretty early in the morning, because our buses leave at 7:30 to make it to Shoal Lake 39, that reserve, and to make it to the lakes themselves. So they get us onto the buses, we load up, and of course a lot of us were, it's pretty early and we're trying to get crammed in here, and we set out to go there. Next, we go to the community center, or it was like a community center, right? So we go to their community center. We have breakfast, eggs and sausage and bacon and the works. And then we get transported via pickup trucks and other, no, for real, it's great, honestly. Pickup trucks, cars, and they just drive us onto the lake. And to which we actually go to, I'm not particularly sure the reason why they chose this spot. It was actually near the residential school, that's why. And so they choose that spot to actually have these workshops, to have these presentations, in which they showed us the processes of how they, like slow-mo footage, and how they drill into the ice. And we even had fires. I remember the chief had asked me if, hey, could you start a fire on the lake? In which I've never done that before, mind you. To me, it just sounds kind of scary, you know what I mean? I even asked him, so how long can this fire stay, lit before it becomes a health hazard for everybody? Are we going to go in? And of course, he explained to me that it's just, the water is going to be its own insulator as it starts to melt, but it won't continuously melt, right? It just stays like that. They said, we have bonfires all the time. Anyway, so to the meat of the presentation, so you can tell I had a blast, by the way. So they taught, and they actually showed us, and a lot of us were able to participate in this, was the throwing of the nets inside, and I forget the processes that he told us. There's this whole, what's that big metal thing called? A jigger? I think? A jigger, right? Yeah. The thingamajigger, yes, absolutely. And as you put that into the hole, you can see it, and it makes this amazing sound into the ice, and you can hear it and that's what they do. They tell us stories that they send dogs, and that's how they'll know, because they'll scratch at it, right? So that's where they know where they want to dig the exit point. So they cast the nets, and you're going to see that as we are pulling, that's not the case. So they're pulling out the nets, and they're showing us, all right, this is what it's all about here, and we're going to see what we're going to be catching. And as in this video, we're going to see, what was that one big fish called they cut? It was a big old pike, right? Yeah, we caught a big pike, and there's just going to be there's photos of us taking turns holding it, right? So they just showed us the aspects of what they do on, every single time when the winter comes. So that was the importance of it. And of course, we had a great time hanging out afterwards. I believe, I know I didn't do any of the cooking. There was, they're bannock. They invited some of us to cook some of the bannock. And of course, to prepare the fish that was caught. All the fish that we caught, we also ate. It was quite good, actually. It was quite good. It really was.
There was a professional photographer, that's why these pictures are amazing.
Yeah, we did it all from with her fried bread. They had a whole table set up, and they had a woman come in, and it was all people from the community. That was nice, you know. They all met us out on the lake. They spent the whole day with us. They taught us how to bring the nets up, grab the fish out of the nets. We all cleaned them ourselves. They showed us how and stuff like that, and taught us how to make fried bread. It was a nice day full of we were laughing and everything, but as soon as they gave us tobacco to bring to the residential school, and that was a really heavy part of the day. And the reason, and this was here, the residential school memorial, and it's actually Cecilia Jefferson Shoal Lake School, and they had made sure they had tobacco for us to bring, and the foundation of the school is still there. A lot of the beds were still there. It was all fun, the whole lake and everything, but as soon as you step onto the island where the actual residential school was, that's when you just feel, you feel everything. It's really heavy, and we all just kind of took it all in and, paid our respects, and that was the middle part of our day. But I think that's the whole point of these activities, and the fact that they do the trainings first on the first 2 days of the conference, because then the next 3 days is self-care, having fun, how to unwind. Because the healing complex trauma training was a lot. They made sure they offered a sweat for that night, for after that, because David Windigo was actually the presenter for that, and he was at a residential school, and he did talk about his own trauma. And as much as we're learning about trauma, we're bringing up all of our own at the same time. So you have to make sure you really do self-care and team building exercises, and that was another part. They said they gave us a bucket and said, all right, first one to get their cedar tea boiling and go. They have a bucket, so that means you got to go find some cedar, and you got to go find some snow, and then you got to build a fire with your team, so it's a lot of team building experiences like that also.
Yeah. I love that. The one and only. Yes, and that's correct. So we had Don Burnstick go to, I believe it was the fourth, it was actually the same day as we went to Shoal Lake, and we did all the ice fishing. We came back, we unwinded for a moment, and of course, Don Burnstick was there, and he wasn't there to actually necessarily give you a comedy show, though the material he did present did have a nice humor to it. He was talking about handling trauma, when it comes back to one of your communities. But his workshop was all about healing through humor, right? And how, he even talks about some of, the indigenous communities are some of the ones who laugh the loudest. And it's because we have a lot of pain, and we're trying to heal from that. And he explains that beautifully in his presentation. And so, again, I like to stress it was not like a comedy special. It was a workshop. And it was beautifully well done. I pretty much presented him to there, and I know we had a bit of a little bit of a mic malfunction during that time, but he was cool about it, and overall, he's a really great guy. And of course, the workshop went great.
So we had one day of outdoor activities, which was all day on the lake, and then the next day we went back to the community center, and then we went to the schools, and they had each room, they had different things we could sign up for. And I think between the 5 of us, we hit every activity except for quill work. But I did see a lot of that too. They had pieces of birch bark, I think, and then they dyed the quills and they made designs in them. So neither of us got to go to that, but I made a basket with Carrie Hill. She came down and ended up being the presenter. I walked in and she's talking away. I had no idea who she was or anything, and she said something, and then she's like, "Oh, Ace," and I'm like, "Where are you from?" Where are you from? She's like, "Akwesasne." I'm like, "Oh my God, I came all the way here to make a basket with someone from Akwesasne." But it was really, really nice anyway. And I made that basket there in the middle, and Kylie was also in that.
Yeah.
Was that your first basket you made?
No, that might be my 3rd basket I made.
Nice.
I made one on Thompson Island. I made another through Ohologo for my moon ceremony basket, and this would be my 3rd one with Carrie.
And what did you make?
I did the drum making. I cannot
remember the instructor's name, but he gave us a lot of teachings about us being as youth to put away our phones, to detox from technology while we are learning. That hit me hard because I'm attached to my phone. So I put my phone away and I learned a lot from him. And I learned one of his songs. It had to do with self-love and trying to heal from depression and anxiety, along with other emotional traumas that he encountered as youth and being bullied as a youth. So I connected with him a lot. So I had brought medicine down with me to give to my instructors, and he appreciated that a lot. And I came home with a really nice drum, and the stitching that is in the middle of my drum is called the God's Eye, or the Creator's Eye. So when you are using your drum, the Creator's always with you, and that when you start singing, your song is being heard by the Creator or God, and so He's close with you, and you put your prayer into it when you're stringing your drum, and you got to pull it tight, and you want to keep it tight so your family and all your friends and loved ones are closely knit with you, and you keep them in your prayer when you do your drum, so everything's tight and you're not going to lose anyone for it being loose. So that struck me hard, so I gave him medicine, and I said my thank yous, and he appreciated it.
And I did the skirt making class, and that was really fun to do because I usually make skirts anyway at work with my mom, and we put on classes, so it's good to see a different way of how they made dresses and skirts and stuff, and they have a more bell shape and it's really big, and they like to show off. It was really shiny. Like, they had a lot of good stuff, and their techniques on how they made things was really cool, and I learned a lot from that. And I got to take the pattern home, so I could teach a lot of people how to do it. And very simple, and it's really pretty, and they come up with a lot of great stuff. So it was really nice to do that.
And then, yes, so I did the, what this is described as called the moccasin game. Now this adrenaline-filled game of deception here, that's the best way I could describe it, because it was a lot of fun. We're joined by Chief Gerald from Shoal Lake 39. He was there to kind of show us the ropes, and of course, we had a crash course via the elders. Now, we played this game. Of course, we split between teams. They explained, or they kind of showed us at first about, like, okay, they gave us this. I think it's like a cattle whip. It's a cattle whip. Yeah. So they give us this whip. I'm a bit concerned at this point, and they're like, all right. And then he smacks like the mat, right? And of course, these if you can tell, there's these little they call them moccasins. It's like little patches of fur fabric, and the whole point of the game is to find the it's like a still little ball with a mark on it. The whole point, similar to, I guess, to a game of Minesweeper, is that you're not supposed to find that right away. You're supposed to say, I think it's there, and it's not in these ones. And so you reveal the other ones and see if you were correct. Now, of course, there's a whole different point system, like this is worth 6 to 8, these are 4 and 4. Oh, and since he did this last turn, he has to do it over here. It's a very complex game, and of course, the whole time the drum is beating, right? And it's getting more and the intensity of it, and of course, you're getting nervous, and if you accidentally touch it, it's like, did you just touch that? And I'm like, no, I didn't mean to touch that. Oh, it was a lot of fun, really. So, it was a really cool experience to actually, hang out with the elders, because they were adamant. It seemed like, they were, joyful, they were happy, and they were teaching us all these things, and I think it was a great bonding experience between youth and elder. Yeah, things got intense. I remember there's a look of me just like ready to whip,
So I wanted this to be a part of the presentation because I found that these 7 teachings kept coming up like almost every day, or somebody brought it up, or And the 7 teachings that they had was, what was that first one? Wisdom. Can you see that picture?
Truth, honesty.
Wisdom, truth, respect, bravery, honesty, humility. Those kept coming up, and I went to a sweat, and I didn't think it was coincidence that, you know, they only took 6 people, and there was like, you know, there was like 100 of us maybe, and it was the second day after our healing complex training, and I was just really drained after the 2 days, and I just wanted to go up to my hotel room and just hang out. But when I was walking by, I seen a sign-up sheet for a sweat, and I'm like, wow, that's really cool. I just so happened to have my skirt with me, so I'm like, I'm gonna go. And I was the only one who went out of the group who went with a lot of other girls, and it was really different to see how they do things out there. It took us like an hour just to get into the sweat with all the protocol that they have and stuff like that, and it was really nice. And he shared a story with us that's usually only done as a ceremony. He said it takes a whole ceremony to tell this story, but he said it to us, and it's really common up there for the women to have their colors. Like they say, you get your name, your colors, and so a lot of them didn't know their name or their colors, and they did that night. So it was really special, and we were only supposed to be gone for, I think, 3 hours, and we left at 6, and we got back at midnight. Like, people were pretty worried about us, but a lot of healing had to go on in there, and it was really nice. And it was probably like, the highlight of my trip anyway, being at that sweat and seeing how attention to detail everyone else does it, and it was just really nice, and different medicines they use in there, and it was really, really awesome. This is a self-defense class. So in the evenings, they kind of just keep it open, and they'll say, okay, well, if you're interested, there's self-defense or there's yoga. I didn't do the yoga, but I did do the self-defense, and it was nice. The instructor brought his 2 daughters along, and just kind of like, his whole intake was, when people teach self-defense, it's like when the confrontation happens and it's physical. He's like, way before that is when you have to be worried and preventing, you know what I mean, altercation is way before the contact happens. But towards the end, he did get into training techniques and stuff like that. So I never took a self-defense course. It was really nice. So I think I didn't do the yoga, but I did do self-defense.
In the middle, what you're going to be seeing right there is this fantastic game called Real Life Hungry Hungry Hippos. Says it pretty much by itself. No, it was just this fun little game that the staff created on the spot, because they're like, oh, we want to do cool little activities. And so they created this. They went to the local Walmart. They got long boards, short boards. They bought little laundry like those little baskets, and a bunch of balloons and little play balls. And we went to town, right? The rules were just simply you get a team, right? Someone's on the the hippo basically, and then the one is grabbing them by the legs, and they're gonna pull them in there. And then there's the one who's got to count all the balls, and then you have to throw them back in the center, and then you got to recast. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, and it was just a good time, honestly. Yeah, and of course it was a fun last-minute game. And of course, at the end, oftentimes we like to have like late-night dance parties, basically little games of musical chairs and things like that. Just fun little things to unwind after a long day of learning.
And we went bowling too. One of the nights we took out the whole bowling alley. It was like a 6-lane bowling alley. We filled that place up, but it was a lot of fun.
Would any of you like to touch that? No?
I won a TV for being early bird registration. It was the rules were very strict. They're like, you have to be here at this time. If your name's called, we'll call a different name if you're not there. 2 names were called, and mine was the 3rd. So I was very surprised. I was like, oh, I'm here.
So she walked away with a TV?
Yeah. Yeah,
they paid for it.
They paid for everything.
Yeah. That's a picture of my certificate training. I did get that before we left because David Windigo was there he was able to sign it. The rest of them had to go through online and get it mailed to them, but I got mine right away on the last day. And that was just a quilt that IFN gave. They just wanted to pay their respects to the community for hosting us and showing us a good time while we were there on the lake, the indoor activities, the people they brought in to do all the activities, yeah. And they just do a really good job of organizing and giving us good activities and just kind of keeping that door open for conversation after we leave. A group chat was made on Facebook that basically has everyone who attended, and it's IFN 2018, so everyone's ideas were constantly bouncing things off of each other. I got invited to a culture exchange in Moose Factory that will be happening this summer, so I'm looking forward to that. And just a lot of opportunities come from these, so next year make sure your nieces, nephews, kids, if you'd like for them to go to one of these, tell them to apply. It's a really good opportunity. They had a drone and they just had a bunch of activities for us to do. We made IFN in our, as people and a drone, and it was just nice. I haven't seen any of the drone footage yet, but that was a lot sick. A lot of pictures, lots of selfies. Yeah, and Tim Hortons.
Yeah. That was great. It was quite a bit of an emotional goodbye oftentimes. Well, when you do go to these youth conferences, you end up leaving with like friendships, right? You form bonds. Either if you were in the same table, say if you were in in the workshops, or you were on the same team boiling tea with snow and water, and or whether it was just from the nightly activities, you simply just met fantastic people from all walks of life, really, right? And it was just a nice way to getting to know people. And of course, when we had to say goodbyes, it was like, add me on Facebook. We need to have a conversation. Let's hang out. And of course, that Facebook conversations that we have, we're always still, it's pretty active, right? So we're always still keeping in correspondence. And yeah, it's just one of those things that as a consequence of being with, all these fantastic people, you do walk away with new friendships. Oh, man.
Is there any other questions before we end?
Sorry, we look pretty mad in that picture. We actually had a great time.
We all had a great time.
When we went out there, it was kind of like...
really gloomy.
Yeah, it was kind of gloomy. We took a few nice pictures, and then the sun came out.
Yeah. The girl taking the picture, she's like, because it's just the Mohawk representatives, and she's taking her picture, and the clouds part, and the sun comes out, and we're all like not smiling. She's like, you guys are so scared. But we're like, no, we've made a lot of great networks, and we're still talking to people in all these IFN communities, and looking forward to next year if we have the opportunity to go again. Thank you.
What is your overall experience, through your thoughts on hosting that here in the Akwesasne community?
I would love to be a part of that if it was to happen. We just need the resources. I would be willing to do the Safe Talk training in suicide prevention for it, for sure, at free of charge, so we won't have to bring anybody in to do a certification, and that would be the certification they could walk away with. All the activities that we had, there's a lot of culture people around here who probably would be willing to put their time in to teach things that, about either medicines or anything like that, just, I want to put one on. I want to be a part of it if it is going to happen. I think it'd be awesome for our youth in Akwesasne, because 5 of us able to go to this, we should have that here. And it would be really nice to see that done. And I would be a part of it if it was to happen, and I'm sure everyone else here would too.
A little bit more information about that. We did have a recent meeting about that. Akwesasne name was on the table when it came to actually hosting one of these. We even had the plan of maybe we throw it on Thompson Island as a summer event, right? However, it was cast to a vote. Akwesasne did not necessarily make the cut, but the conversation was still there. They are interested, and maybe a couple of years down the line that Akwesasne could host whatever annual year it would be for one of those.
Even if it wasn't under IFN, if we just put it on ourselves and maybe found a grant or something, or funding, we could do this ourselves away from IFN too, just to have, and maybe start our own annual youth conference in Akwesasne if everyone was able to be a part of it. And I think that would be really nice too.
Yeah, I think that would be very important for our youth now to work towards a bigger thing, but to have smaller ones,
Yep.
you know, just for a community use.
Yep.
All right, well, thank you very much for the fulsome presentation. All right, so we will continue on with our agenda. Thank you very much to the youth again for providing us with the presentation on their trip to Shoal Lake. So just for, that is a flight from Ottawa to Winnipeg directly, and then a 3-hour drive to Nora, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it was a connected flight from Ottawa
Yeah.
to Toronto, then to Winnipeg,
Winnipeg,
then a
and
2-hour.
then 2-hour drive back into Ontario.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so the next presentation we're going to do is the tobacco pilot project. I'll ask the director of Dale Dinawaga to please come forward. We do have, I believe, a PowerPoint presentation with that as well.
Thank you. I'll go right to the first slide, and the tobacco work that we've been doing for 6 years, and in our discussions with Ontario specifically, these are the parameters that the council has put in place back in 2012 and with the existing council. And this was sort of the bottom line in discussions with Ontario. The first one is that Akwesasne will not be a tax collector for the province. The second one is that revenue generated by cigarette sales in Akwesasne stays in Akwesasne. The third bullet is that price parity or tax parity is not an option. Our businesses won't stay open. And then finally, that being able to trade native manufactured cigarettes needs to be part of the discussion. And it's been relayed to Ontario from the beginning, and they've agreed to this. And I'll talk about it in more detail in the presentation. The next slide, and by the way, if you haven't picked up a copy, the presentation's available in the back. Most recently, Council signed an agreement in principle on December 20th, 2017. And what that document does is it lays out the process for entering into a final agreement on tobacco with Ontario. Since we did that, the Union of Ontario Indians signed a similar agreement in principle in March, and they represent 40 First Nation communities. In addition to that, the Chippewas of the Thames had signed an agreement in principle back in June of last year, and the Association of Iroquois and Allied Indians is researching signing one, and they represent 7 communities. So since Council approved signing in December, over 40 First Nations have stepped up, and they represent about 1/3 of all First Nations in Ontario. The next slide, the actual, I'm going to go through, and these are the key provisions that we're looking for in the final agreement. This is the first one, and Section 87 of the Indian Act prevents the province from taxing cigarette sales to First Nation members on reserve. And we wanted to make certain that that right was respected and included in the final agreement, and it is. The next slide. We wanted recognition of our rights in these areas. The Section 35 constitutional assertion of MCA's right to regulate tobacco and not have the province do it or the federal government do it. Having the agreement acknowledge MCA's United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, right to self-determination, Article 4 specifically. At the same time, we would acknowledge the province's assertion of its constitutional jurisdiction to regulate tobacco in the province. The next slide. With rights come responsibilities. And the province wanted us to take responsibility. If we're imposing a stamping agent fee, if we decide to do an export fee, then that's our responsibility to do that, and that we're doing it to fund the functions of government. The next slide. When we had talked about the agreement in principle, one of the questions that had come up was, well, how do you get the province to make this a binding agreement? And to do that, they passed legislation back in December. And it did a couple of things. One, it authorized the Minister of Finance to enter into an agreement with MCA on tobacco, included both respecting our regulations on reserve and having the ability to transport tobacco on and off reserve. And this provision lays the groundwork for regulated trade with other First Nations in the province. The next slide. At the same time, the provincial legislation empowered the Lieutenant Governor in Council and gave him the authority to create regulations that authorize incorporating aspects of the Akwesasne tobacco law into provincial regulations and exempting tobacco products and persons that are subject to our law from their regulations. And to do this, they had to amend the Ontario Tobacco Tax Act, and they did that in December of last year. The next slide. The key part of the agreement is that we would propose increasing our existing stamping agent fee from $5.10 to $25 per carton. And that's for our existing vendors. In doing that, we would then subsidize $20 back to those vendors. So the net effect is no change. There's no change in pricing. What they end up paying for the stamping agent fee stays to $5.10 in the end. And by doing that, it would legalize sales to non-First Nation customers. And in addition to that, we would propose to open a store in Hamilton Island. The stamping agent fee would be $29 per carton. There would be no subsidy. It would target non-First Nation customers, and those sales to them would be legal. Yes?
Yeah, you have to still implement a tax on it. You still have to put a tax on the non-natives buying off that store on Hamilton Island. I don't know how the government can turn around and say, no, agreement, I don't care what agreement you have with the council. I think that you're going to run into problems because, you know, 87 of the Indian Act, no matter if it says, you know, an Indian or a band situated on reserve is exempt from taxation. Your company is the Three Feathers Corporation, which is not an Indian. It's a corporation. It's not considered Indian under that Indian Act. And another thing is that an article came out today, I don't know if you got the Standard Radio list, 5 things to know about cannabis in Ontario's budget. And it's saying on here, I'll read it to you, this came out in today's paper. Ontario plans to apply the full harmonized sales tax at 13% to off-reserve purchases of recreational cannabis by a status Indian ban or ban counter, similar to tobacco and alcoholic beverages. So if you're going to set up a store on Hamilton Island and a lot of non-natives are going there, what agreement would you have with the province or anybody that they're not going to pay some kind of a tax for the product?
This is the agreement. They've already agreed to this language.
So what do we have to give up?
Nothing. It's an assertion of our rights. It's consistent with what the Truth and Reconciliation Commission called for in a new relationship between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Canada. It's consistent with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People that says recognize First Nation right to self-govern, self-regulate. So it's them honoring those documents.
Jim, are you saying that because of this agreement, whether you're a corporation under the Band Council, are you saying that someone on another island out on the St. Lawrence that has property can, maybe you can, on Thompson Island or some island up there who has a CP owns that property, what says that they can't do it? Why does it only agreement in principle or this agreement with the province only for your convenience store up Hamilton's Island? What about other people? If you're going to use inherent right, especially indigenous rights, to go ahead and make a deal with the province on this taxation, I mean, what about the people that actually have islands and want to set up? Why can't they do it?
Yeah, it has to be done in a regulated environment, and if a store on another island can meet the conditions, then sure.
Okay, since this agreement's with Ontario, what about Quebec?
There's no agreement with Quebec portion. We had to start somewhere. Ontario was willing to sit down and listen, so we started there. We're hoping that it will lead to getting Quebec to sit down and have a discussion and show them that, hey, it works here, it would work there. It's not an agreement with the federal government, and that's a whole number issue, but we're hoping it opens doors to start having discussions with them as well.
Shouldn't we have done an agreement with the federal government?
Pardon?
Shouldn't we have been done with the federal government?
At the time that we started, they weren't willing to sit down. And you have to, in order to do an agreement like this, you have to have a party that's willing to sit down with you. Ontario was, and since then, the federal government has changed. You went from conservatives to liberals. Now they're listening. But we've got to conclude this one first.
Hey Jim, could you explain again about those quotas? The people on the island that have quotas for cigarettes.
Yes.
Okay, their quota, I hear from people at the Peachtree Mall that their quotas are being mad at the customers. Non-natives buy their quotas, and then when they're there, they take all the product away from them. So what happens on Hamilton's Island when the non-natives go there and say, okay, I can purchase a cigarette for you at $29 a carton. I can even, you know, we mentioned this before about the cannabis coming in. So sales of cannabis will be, recreational cannabis will be legal to sell that also in that store, right? So to me, there's got to be that 13% tax that they're talking about. I think they would enforce that.
Yeah.
And where was that tax going? They make you pay a tax just to have that store open. Where's the tax going to go?
There will be no provincial taxes applied to a Hamilton Island store. Just as well, there will be no provincial tax applied to any store on the island.
What about federal tax?
There's already federal tax on the quota allocation cigarettes. It's embedded in the manufacturing cost. So that's always been that way, and since cigarettes have been sold in the community, and this will not change that, although we believe that an agreement with Ontario could lead to a discussion with the federal government about the federal excise tax.
Will this be going to referendum?
Pardon?
Will this be going to referendum?
That's up to council to decide, and when I get further into the presentation, I'll present some of the concerns about timelines to get this done.
It's interesting, you have a store, you're going to be selling cigarettes, tobacco. Where are you going to get tobacco from?
Right now, the tobacco is coming from the Ontario quota allocation system. And how that works is Ontario cannot tax cigarettes purchased by First Nation people for their personal consumption. And so they figured out a system that allocates to every First Nation based on population a certain number of cartons. In our case, it's 149,000 cartons,
But who's
based
making
on
your
population.
cigarettes? Who's making your cigarettes?
They're the major name brands.
Oh, so it's not locally?
Not yet.
You don't have your own factory?
No.
So you'll be getting cigarettes from the big companies?
Right, and that's how the system's been working.
What's the Canadian brand?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a copy of the tobacco law?
Yes.
Do you have a few copies just so people can see the regulations?
It's available on the MCA website, so you can get copies on there from the website. I just got one copy with me. So back to the presentation, the Hamilton Island store would have a $29 per carton stamping agent fee, and that store would be targeting non-First Nation customers. It would be legal for them to purchase. There would be a 5 carton limit in a transaction, but they would pay the stamping agent fee. There would be no provincial taxes owed. We haven't addressed the, we've received indications from the province. They will not attempt to include their part of the HST on those sales. We still have to sit down with the federal government and get them to not charge their part of the HST. That's going to be part of further negotiations that will have to occur, but that's our objective. The next slide. The stamping agent fee applies to all sales to both First Nation and non-First Nation consumers on reserve, and the agreement legalizes sales to non-First Nation customers. And it comes with the province agreeing with that. And what this does is, one of the biggest challenges right now that you had pointed out, Dave, is that, well, a couple of them. One is that under the current system, non-First Nation customers are in violation of provincial law when they buy quota allocation cigarettes on reserve. It's not just here, it's every reserve in Ontario. The problem for us is we're the only one that they enforce it, and that's because of CBSA. And this solution will address that. Ontario will recognize those sales as being legitimate. It then allows us to go to CBSA and let them know that these sales are legitimate, and if they have a stamp from the MCA on the carton, the sales are legal, and CBSA can't lay charges on people for having cigarettes. They have to hold them for somebody else. The federal excise tax is on them, so the RCMP don't have a reason to hold them. So they've been holding them for the Ontario Provincial Police. With this agreement, the Ontario Provincial Police will not have any charges to lay because the sales will be legitimate. And that will stop the individuals from being hassled for purchasing cigarettes in Akwesasne.
Okay, we have 2 questions. Go ahead and do it first here.
What will be the limit for them to buy off of Hamilton Island, like on the island?
5 cartons.
5 cartons?
Yes.
Okay, over here. You have a question?
Do you think people are just going to stop buying illegal cigarettes and go to your little store in Hamilton Island? Or do you think you're going to be sitting there at this little store in Hamilton Island with no customers because are people just going to, oh, we're going to stop because Jim and his little agreement says that it's legal now? You know, it's ridiculous to think that I can't buy a carton of cigarettes in Cornwall for $10. Or I just, you know, I think I won't buy that carton. I'll drive 30 miles to Hamilton Island and pay $30. Like, where's the realistic, you know, people aren't going to stop. You know, you're going to be sitting there like a little kid at a lemonade stand, nobody buying your lemonade.
Yeah, no, the Hamilton Island store is is meant to target non-First Nation customers in the Cornwall area.
Well,
And the price difference between that store and Cornwall will be about $20 a carton. And with that difference, they go where it's the cheapest, and they don't have to go through the toll booth twice, which adds $7 to a price from the island. They don't have to deal with CBSA, even though it won't be an issue.
I don't think you're understanding though, because you can buy a carton of cigarettes for $8 out there.
Where?
Anywhere. In Cornwall, you can buy it for $8, and it's from a guy, opens his trunk, and he gives you a carton for $8.
Yes.
Why would that guy that paid $8 say, no, I'm going to go to Jim's store and pay 3 times the amount?
Right.
It doesn't...
Yeah, you would never get them as a customer anyway. But it's the rest of the community that don't buy from that contraband source that will consider this.
How does that help the people on the island who have stores?
What's that?
How does that help the people on the island who have stores when they're being targeted by the CBSA all the time?
It will help. It should help the island stores because we're going to remove CBSA as being an issue, because those sales will be legitimate, and there's no reason for CBSA to stop them.
There was a question over here. Yeah.
You're putting your store in a rural area,
yes.
Right? So the gentleman over there had quite an interesting point. You're putting it in a rural area where we don't know what their purchases are for cigarettes. But we do know that you put it into a more concentrated population, such as Cornwall, you would get better sales. So why would you put your store on Hamilton Island as opposed to Cornwall? Is it because
it's on reserve?
It's on reserve. So would you not put a store on Cornwall Island? That's on reserve.
We already have stores at Cornwall Island.
That's personally MCA run or privately owned?
No, privately owned, and those stores have to deal with customs, have to deal with the toll booth. Hamilton Island store doesn't have to do that. So that's part of the reason, and if you let me finish, I'll tell you the other reason. Okay, the next slide. The revenue generated from the stamping agent fee stays in Akwesasne. Nothing goes to the province. And Ontario's tobacco tax would not be collected on any sales made within Akwesasne lands, including to non-First Nation customers. And there is a provision that within 5 years that we would match future increases for provincial tobacco tax with our existing vendors. Right now, they don't have to do that, but we are being asked to phase it in over a 5-year period. For example, beginning in April, the provincial tobacco tax rate is going up by $4 a carton. So that's why Hamilton Island is going from not charging 25 to 29, so it's going to match it. The island stores and the community stores don't have to do that. But they will, over time, match that increase. The price difference will always be there. We just don't want it widened. And that's one of the requirements the province was asking. The next slide. In exchange for doing this, for increasing the stamping agent fee to $25, for setting a stamping agent fee on the Hamilton Island store of $29 per carton. In exchange for that, Ontario will share a portion of all provincial tobacco tax revenue with the council. And they're planning to do this in April of 2019. And in the period between now and then, they're prepared to offer an implementation grant to help us get to that point. And the next slide, the revenue sharing will be $7 million a year for 10 years. So $70 million over that 10-year period is what the province is prepared to share in exchange for us doing these things. And they are working on a revenue sharing formula, and it may reduce how much we get, but we've locked them in for 10 years. Their goal is to have all First Nations in the province participate, and they've set aside $120 million. We're tentatively the first ones in, and face the most risk in trying to do this, so they're prepared to offer a higher compensation than what they think we would be entitled to otherwise. And so that's how it would come into. If the amount in the final formula is lower, we're locked in for the 10 years, and at the end of the 10 years, we would then sit down with them and have a discussion about it.
So there is absolutely no amount that will come from the revenue that will be gained in Akwesasne going to Ontario. They're just going to share their profits with us?
None. All the revenue generated in the community stays in the community.
Even after this 10-year period?
Even after the 10-year period. That was a fundamental requirement that Council had put forward, and the province is honoring it. This might be the last slide. Let me see the next one. The schedule. We're on a tight timeline, and let me explain this. We're presenting here. I'm presenting the full council on Tuesday. We may schedule an additional community meeting next week, and we're hoping for some type of council decision by April 9th. The province is prepared to make a decision on April 10th. And the reason is that right now we have a Liberal government in Ontario that's willing to sit down and reach agreement with us. However, they're calling an election. Right now it may be May 9th. It may be sooner. The chances of this government getting re-elected are not good. They may surprise people, but the thinking out there is a new conservative government may come into power. If that occurs, this opportunity will be lost for probably at least a year, if not longer. So that's what's working against us, and that's why we've been working to try to get an agreement while we have a government willing to sit down. And so that's the big concern we have right now. And if we had more time and could do more community engagement, we would love to. But in order to meet this timeline, we don't have that luxury.
Yeah, Jim, I'm just wondering, you're saying this is all tax exempt for non-natives to come and buy your cigarettes, $29 a carton, there's no taxes on it. Provincial government's going to step back. Federal government, you haven't cleared it yet. And you're saying there's $7 million. Where's that $7 million going to go? Is that to the Prefectures Corporation? Is that like a $7 million a year? And how is that going to distribute amongst the community?
Yeah. This young lady over here had asked a question about the tobacco law, and in section 5 it talks about community responsibility, and in community responsibility it lists how tobacco revenue should be spent, and there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, about 14 different categories that it could be spent in.
Who implements that? The ban?
It gets implemented through council.
Through council, right?
Yes, but it was passed by community. So this is community's direction on how the funding should be spent. And it's pretty broad. Health, safety, well-being of members, language, cultural heritage, educational trust. It covers, emergency disaster relief, social needs, promoting recreational programs, protecting treaty rights, justice, security, protection of members, natural environment, economic development, improving infrastructure in the community, acquiring land. So it's very broad. And in talking to one of the vendors, I asked him, how could this benefit businesses in the community? And his response was, get rid of the toll booths. For businesses on the island, that can make the single biggest difference. So in talking with him, I said, well, why not use part of that $7 million to buy the toll booth and privatize it? And we operate it. We move it to the island at the base of the bridge to the U.S. and it clears up people coming from Cornwall to the island, and they don't have to pay the toll anymore. That would help our businesses more than anything else.
Is this a band council-owned business?
What's that?
Is this a band council-owned corporation?
The Three Feathers Corporation? Yes. Other questions? If not, I'll talk about cannabis. I've got 4 slides on cannabis. Council asked me to address this, and you had raised the question. So, if you're not familiar, federal legislation regarding recreational cannabis passed second reading in the Senate on March 22nd. And the third reading vote is scheduled for June 2018. And it's to legalize recreational cannabis. And if you're not familiar, medical cannabis has already been legalized. So this is for recreational purposes. In the legislation, provinces and territories oversee the distribution and retail sale of the marijuana and all in those aspects of the cannabis supply chain. First Nations have been left out of the discussion. And the next slide. In terms of recreational cannabis, the regulations are going to be similar to what you have for tobacco. There's going to be regulations setting the minimum age to purchase it. There's going to be regulations for how retail sales should be done. There's going to be prohibitions on where you can't use it. There's going to be regulations in regards to road safety and using cannabis. And there's going to be enforcement and penalties for non-compliance. That's what regulatory systems do. So whether it's tobacco or cannabis, you have to have regulations. The next slide. The federal government's proposing a $1 per gram tax on marijuana sales, and costing up to $10 per gram, and then 10% above that price point. They've reached agreement to share that tax between the federal government and provinces and territories. And they're prepared to give 75% to the provinces and territories and keep 25%. No mention of First Nations in this. As somebody said, the PST, GST, and HST is intended to be applicable on all sales, including to First Nation customers. I think we got a letter on that. So the next slide. From our perspective, one of the things we have to consider is, can we use it as an opportunity to assert self-government authority through self-regulation of recreational cannabis, much like tobacco? And Council is going to have to develop regulations and our policies for recreational cannabis use in the community. regardless of what we do, this is the minimum we have to do it. Cannabis in the workplace, cannabis around schools, cannabis in public places has to be addressed. We have the additional burden of dealing with customs. It's illegal in New York State, and if you're going from the island to St. Regis, you go through U.S. Customs, you risk getting stopped and charged. So it has to be addressed. And revenue, it could be a revenue stream if we do regulation and if sales within the community are regulated. I think there's one last slide. No, that's it. Questions on cannabis?
You said that the risk of going from Cornwall Island to other areas of the territory. Well, if you purchase something in Ontario, such as cannabis, and they sealed it with either a stamp or a seal, like a seal, and then you can't break it until you're in either your own home or you'll have it stapled, and you can't open it because that's your personal with your name on it. Do they have the right to go through?
No.
So you can essentially go through customs, and that's your personal purchase. It's sealed. You're not using it. You're just in transport.
You can't possess it. Period.
But
you will be stopped.
But you can't possess.
And you can be charged.
You can possess fentanyl on you.
In the U.S.?
Yes.
I don't know.
No, but it's an opioid, right? It's a narcotic, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, medical marijuana, yes, if it's by prescription. It is legal in New York. Recreational cannabis is not.
Oh, okay. I guess.
So there is a difference.
Okay.
Yes.
But you did say Seven Feathers was a corporation owned by MCA, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
3 feathers. No, Seven Leaf is a private company that is attempting to get a medical marijuana license.
There's 2, 7 and 3.
Yeah.
3
Feathers Corporation is an economic development corporation.
Okay.
7 Leaf is applying for a medical marijuana manufacturing license from Health Canada.
To operate on Cornwall Island.
To operate on Cornwall Island.
Which the community is not harmed. They don't want that.
That's still under discussion with council.
All right, we still have other questions here, and then we're going to go through here and back.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, in Diana Negative, they have 16 dispensaries.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Nobody's bothering them.
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that.
Well, they've been getting away with it for quite a while. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. They're relying on sovereignty. They're saying they have a sovereign right to go and do whatever they want on the web. Now, if this is coming quick, and July is going to legalize. So if you don't have regulations in place on the territory here, so what will you be following? What would be enforced in the laws here? Is it the federal? It should be federal, right? Federal, whatever.
Well, see,
they just left First Nations right out.
Therein lies the problem, because with the federal legislation, the federal government regulations apply at the manufacturing end. So that side of the equation's regulated already. And what we expect to happen is that if you're a private company and you have a license to manufacture medical marijuana, that they're going to give you a license to manufacture recreational cannabis. Because that's the only way they can make this happen by July. So on the manufacturing side, it's addressed, and there are already regulations in place. It's on the distribution and the retail sale that they've delegated it down to the provinces and territories and said, you figure it out. And in doing that, though, First Nations don't come under the jurisdiction of provinces. So much like tobacco, we're thrown into a void, and we have to figure it out. And if you set aside whether or not we should do retail sales and how we should do it, we still have to deal with community members legally possessing cannabis, and what does that mean for the workplace? Because we have to protect the safety of our workers. What's it mean for the school environment? Because we don't want to mix the two. So we have to think about these things. What's it mean for law enforcement in a community when you have somebody that's high on recreational cannabis driving and gets in an accident? And how do you determine that they shouldn't be driving? So that has to be figured out. And nobody's providing us with resources to do any of this.
Okay, we have a few others. We have one over here, back.
I'm sitting here and I'm trying to absorb what you are trying to do, because it's never going to work. Like, now we're back to your store and you're selling cigarettes and you're selling weed now. Because you can't do it on the island. Oh my God, the customs are going to arrest everybody. So now, it's like, how, you know what I mean? Like, you're telling yourself that these things that you're trying to put forward is going to actually work, because it's not. I went to Ottawa to get my passport, new status card, we did the whole thing. My sister's like, I wonder if they sell that oil stuff for my anxiety. So we looked it up on our phone, dispensary. We went there, they said we need a prescription. Okay, I understand. Place smelled like weed, there's a little glass door, and that's what it was. The girl behind the desk was, okay, well, here's the address to a place where you don't need a prescription. They do the same thing. So we went to that place. And there was a lineup of hippies, they're all there to get their weed. All you needed to do was be of age. And then you go in this back room and it's all there on shelves and, easily, readily available. All you have to do is be, I think it was 19. But it didn't make no sense, because they're both regulated. One, you can't go in the door because you want the prescription, but she sends you to a place where you can go in the door. And it makes no sense. It was like, you're getting yourself, and you think people that already sell weed, medical or recreational, are just automatically going to stop, because they're not. And right now, the weed guy, I have friends everywhere. They sell weed, they've been selling weed. Now that medical marijuana is legal, you go into their little weed store and you get it in a nice little jar, and it's got a little fancy name, which didn't have that. Where's the regulations? Like, you're talking about regulation and this and that. It's not going to work. It's not. I see it. Yeah. And all these people, they own dispensaries in Tygenega, and they all live here. There's 100 of them. Their weed gets shipped in the mail to Tygenega, and they go pick it up, they bring it home. And now, it's like, it's a mess. You think that this is going to stop any of that? It's not. Yeah. And you're not going to make any money from it. You're talking about revenue streams and all this stuff. It's not going to happen. You're going to be stuck sitting there with a pile of papers that's very tough.
Yeah, and to your point about the weed guy, we went to the state of Washington, and marijuana, recreational cannabis is legal in Washington state. And in going there, we went and spent time with 4 tribes. 3 of them operate through their ECDEB corporations marijuana stores. And I asked them that question, well, how'd you hire staff? Who are your experts? They said, the weed guy. He's been doing it for 20 years. He knows the product. So we hired him, gave him a job in our store. So that's how they address that. And the tribe regulates the store, and I was impressed. They're nice stores. It's like a jewelry store, glass cases, and like you said, as soon as you get in the door, you got to show your ID, because they check everybody. And that's a tribal regulation that requires that. So they've created regulations, and if they can create regulations, we can create regulations. It's not rocket science. It's standard practices.
So what you're saying now, you said paid regulations, but they're excluding us from all their laws in Canada.
They're excluding us?
Yeah, you said it yourself.
Yes. You know why they're excluding us? Because the tobacco law that we develop is equal to what their law is for their people. And our argument with them was, if we develop a law that's equal to the law that you have for your people, what difference does it make? It's a law. And it's being enforced, it's being done fairly, and it's treating the people fairly. And we've convinced them that that can work.
Okay, and we have a couple others here, and then back to here.
So if the cannabis law is going to be similar to the tobacco law, people will be able to go and get a license to distribute, right? And will they only, are you going to be offering licenses for producers too? Like somebody can set up their own growing operation and then you stamp the bag and say, okay, this is licensed by us here. And then,
yeah.
That's what's in the tobacco law right now.
Yeah. We are not anywhere near that point in time. I'm not suggesting, we regulate. That's up to the community to decide. All I'm doing is presenting, this is what we have to deal with.
Until then, would we fall under Ontario's law?
That's the concern, is that if we do nothing, then Ontario may try to assert jurisdiction. Quebec may try to assert jurisdiction. That's the risk we run.
Because with the Dundee agreement, if that goes through, there's lots of farmlands that can be bought up, and those can be used.
Yes.
Production.
Yes. Yeah. And the more that you self-govern yourself, you create your own regulation, your own processes, it gives less arguments for those external jurisdictions to try to interfere in your affairs.
With the self-governance, who's to say that they're going to let us keep our tax exempt?
What do you mean?
Like because with the nation doing it, we're going to move to self-governance. Who's going to say they're going to be like, if they're even going to agree? I think that's
I can't really speak for them, but from what I've seen, they're not intending to give up any of our rights in that area.
Okay. Well, here you have a question.
Just wanted to make a comment because my friend here said something about opening up a store in Thompson Island. I really hope not, because over the years we've frowned upon people smoking because of the youth and elders, that thing, and then the only tobacco that we promoted was the traditional tobacco from the elders or from the spiritual leaders and medicine people, and that's the only thing that gets promoted on Thompson Island. And I would hope that we would never open up a store for cigarettes. I quit smoking 20 years ago. Everybody should quit smoking.
All right, we'll go ahead for...
My only concern was, how do you feel this will affect you in the future?
How do you what?
How do you think this is going to affect you in the future?
The tobacco or recreational cannabis? Both. The reason that you would go to a higher royalty is that the higher the royalty, the less people smoke, and particularly young people that can't afford the price to begin with. So that's a positive. The challenge we have in Akwesasne is that the competition for the island isn't in Cornwall, it's the American side. The cigarettes there are so much cheaper, and you can't compete against them. But at least on the Canadian side, the higher prices will help to reduce people smoking, as Bob said. That's one of the objectives of why you would do this. Cannabis is going to be an interesting issue, and there needs to be an education and awareness campaign that should have been underway by now that hasn't happened. And that's going to be important for youth in particular, so that you're more aware of the dangers that can be associated with overuse. It's a drug, and like any drug, if you use too much, then it can cause problems. But it's also a drug that's been bashed for so long by pharmaceutical companies, by corporate America, to give it a bad name when it's a medicine. So you have to balance that and educate and raise awareness.
Okay, all right. I want to thank you, Jim. As he mentioned in one of his presentations, there are some timelines in there, so we will, as Jim mentioned, be holding some community meetings moving forward with respect to the tobacco pilot project. And with respect to the cannabis, there is the committee has been formed, and they have just recently wrapped up a survey, and they will be looking over that. There will be more community consultation with respect to the cannabis as this goes forward. Yes.
Yeah. Why do you call it medical marijuana and recreational cannabis? why tell me, because I've heard it. Like, why do you not say recreational marijuana? I don't understand why.
Medical marijuana takes a different form than recreational cannabis, and you can get medical marijuana in a pill, a salve, in addition to the bud. Recreational cannabis is the bud. And you have to understand that with medical marijuana, it's the percentages of the ingredients that treat the illness. And it's a combination of the THC and the CBD that combination makes the difference. And what surprised me when I went to the reservation store in the state of Washington and was walking around looking at display cases and what they had dog treats. And I said, dog treats? And I said, what's it for? And they said it's for older dogs who get anxiety when there's fireworks or gunshots. And I said, I got one of those. And they said you give the dog the treat and it calms them down. So that's medical cannabis. Recreational cannabis is for your personal enjoyment. So that's some of the difference.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Just really quickly on this, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask, well, I know you said that we're not part of the negotiating when it comes to paying tax on the recreational cannabis to the medical marijuana. You said something about that when it comes to tobacco, we're going to be getting $7 million for yes. Yes. Or do you think that could be used towards a J tree or towards a 7 tree or something? I can't remember exactly, but the J tree states that we're supposed to have LHST on the reservation.
Yeah.
Federal taxes. Yeah. So do you think that could be implemented in the field? Because like you said, that we're not part of the field when it comes to taxes.
Yes. Yes. And let me make sure I understand the question and so the rest can understand it. The question is, if we're going to get $7 million a year from the tobacco revenue, could part of it be used to help strengthen the recognition of the J Treaty? And it's certainly a possibility and would be subject to discussion with council. And you've got two Liberal governments, both provincial and federal, that are willing to sit down, but I don't know how long that's going to last. So the opportunities there, whether or not we can take advantage is the question.
All right, thank you, Chief Straussy, and then we have to move along. We do have other items that we need to cover tonight.
Just one thing on the tobacco agreement with Ontario and the federal government is that we are also looking to include in there a clause for people in our territory who have been branded as so-called illegal movers of tobacco to have that sentence wiped right out so that they can move freely between Akwesasne between Gawanoga, Snai, Penobscot, and in Hoganburg as well.
You're saying, offer them apart?
Pardon?
You're gonna offer them apart?
That's almost what we're going to be putting on the table with Ontario. Is the same. I'll just give you an example of what happened in Vermont. Vermont legalized marijuana, and what they did is they wiped out. Right now, they wiped out 160 records of those people who have been convicted of marijuana offenses. That's the same type of parameter we want to push to the Ontario government as well.
Regular tobacco by now.
That's right. That's right.
So with cannabis, you want to do that too?
We haven't reached it. Like Jim has mentioned, we haven't reached that point yet. We're in terms of doing that. We haven't crossed that bridge yet. We want to see if we can move that particular part of it with the Ontario, with the tobacco pilot project, and then we'll move along to cannabis. But that's certainly a point that we can look at as well. But for the time being, we're looking at including that in our agreement with Ontario, is that those who have a criminal record in terms of with tobacco, we want to see if we can get a pardon for that, or at least something that we can have people move freely without being harassed at the customs.
Really quickly.
Yeah, I was just wondering in the talks of the pardoning, things like that, what about people who have been convicted and even had paid fines and stuff like that? Is there any talks of things like that?
That's just in the initial phases. That's part of what we're discussing in terms of doing that type of agreement with Ontario with that particular part of the tobacco.
All right. Okay. So we will move forward. We will have more consultation meetings on tobacco pilot. The committee is formed for the cannabis. They will continue to consult with the community. But for now, we're going to move forward with the agenda. So we're going to provide a quick update on the land claims on which we have ongoing. So we do have the Dundee diesel claim, which we have the offer for $239 million from Canada on right now for the lost use of 18,200 acres of land. Final negotiations are still ongoing right now. The Dundee claim agreement will be finalized and released to the community in the coming weeks once it has been finalized. When the final settlement agreement is finalized, we will hold more detailed informational meetings with the community. As well, a referendum will be publicly announced after we do an extensive consultation, extensive information session with the community on the agreement itself. Community members have requested more council participation in the discussions. Community members have a common goal to have the settlement proceeds to be used towards land acquisition purchases. So thus far we have had a number of community meetings, and that is one of the common trends that we're hearing, is that people want us to use some or a good portion of the proceeds to buy more land to expand the community. As well, management and environment is also consistent message I've been hearing. So people are concerned about the environment as far as protection of the lands and the community lands. So the community discussions will continue and will be conducted at different locations in the month of April. As well, we will begin consultation with the community on what how the proceeds will be used. Again, we've heard preliminary that community wants us to buy additional lands. So community members will vote on the upcoming in a referendum that is planned for the fall. There'll be a 30-day election, a 30-day referendum process for the electronic voting, as well as paper ballots will be had at a polling station. Again, that date has not been set, but it is targeted for late in the fall of this year. So with respect to the Seaway claim, we did receive an offer back in December of 2017 from the federal government to resolve the long-standing grievances for the construction and operation of the Seaway, as well as the expropriation of the land on Cornwall Island. We have received an offer from Canada for $46 million to settle that claim. Again, we are continuing to work towards a final agreement with Canada on the resolving that claim. As soon as a final agreement has been reached, we will then start rolling that out to the community as well to inform the community what the agreement says, what exactly the settlement means, and then we will move towards a referendum of the acceptance of that claim. Will not take place until after the the Dundee referendum occurs. So Dundee will occur sometime in the fall, and then shortly after that, the Seaway referendum will be had for the settlement of the Seaway claim for the offer that's been provided to us. So that's just a quick update on the two claims that we have on the two major claims that we have ongoing. As previously reported, we do have the Baxter and Barnhart claims, which the Baxter Barnhart has been resubmitted to INAC and was not accepted, so we're continuing to research that as well. The North Shore claim, which includes 30 mile along the river of the St. Lawrence, was submitted and was rejected and will be resubmitted again to the federal government as we continue to do additional research on those two claims. So, yes?
Yeah, he had 9 claims out when the other chief was in there. He said not to mention names.
Yep.
The land claims that were all put in place, the Nutfield tract had a claim on it. The Nutfield tract is Indian land. That's ours. We never surrendered it. It's not designated and it's not appropriated. That land is still ours. So I'm wondering why they canceled that claim, the Nutfield tract, and they added it to the North Shore. But if they're going to add it to the North Shore, why do we have that claim anyway? I mean, if it was me, I think that what we need to fight for with the Nutfield tract, because all the deeds say IL on it. It's Indian land. It's our land. And all the railroad tracks, all the gas lines, everything that crosses that 2-mile stretch of the Nutfield tract should have been collected a long time ago. I don't know who collects it, if it's ST&G, is it Glen Walter, which municipality out there is collecting for all the use of that land. That should have been addressed a long time ago, because that's our land. There shouldn't be a claim on it. We need to march out there and talk to their council and get some of that money back, because that's our land. So I'm just wondering why you took the claim off, which is right. There shouldn't be a claim anyway because we own it. If you put a specific claim, it looks like, oh, we're trying to fight that in court so that we own that land, where it's already ours.
Yeah. Well, it's not. We haven't removed any claims with respect to North Shore and the Nutfield.
Well, that was told to me at that presentation we put on.
Okay.
I asked about the Nutfield. They said
it's all into one now.
Into one, the North Shore.
Yeah.
But you know, we have a lot of people here that need jobs.
Yep.
We need to get out there.
No, absolutely. Obviously both of them have breaches of the Crown's obligation to us. So the circumstances on each are a bit different, but they are the track and the North Shore are all in the same area. So it's a strategy which we've undertaken right now. Mind you, none of them have been accepted for negotiation. The strategy can change. There's only so many claims that we can research and submit and negotiate at the same time. So our focus has been right now is the Dundee and the Seaway behind it. So once those are solidified and the community accepts it, then it provides us in a better position to be able to resource more research and to be able to assert these claims a bit more.
Another thing, Chamber, I understand that the Seaway claim, the $45 million is for along the river that Transport Canada was claiming. They're releasing that back to us. That's the 45. What I understand, the Seaway claim is broken down in different sections. The power project, it has appropriation of the customs, the illegality between the appropriation of the customs, the toll booth, the revenue sharing of the toll booth. I've seen the claim, there's a lot to it. But this $45 million seems to me that's not what was on the table with the Seaway claim. That's a section of it, I think. That's just with that Transport Canada with the bridge.
It's for the construction and operation of the Seaway, as well as the expropriation of the land of the corridor.
But not the customs.
The customs area, yes. Not in Cornwall. Only
No,
Cornwall Island.
The expropriation on the island.
Yes, that's included.
That was a different section of the claim, though.
This is all wrapped into it.
Wow, it was 300 and something million.
Well, every time somebody sues the Mohawk Council, they ask for $100 million. So this is a tactic in the legal world that everybody throws a large number.
40 million.
So, go ahead.
The landowners that own land in that expropriation that you're talking about ain't got nothing to do with that 46 million.
Say that again? The landowners that own in the area?
Yeah, the area you guys got 46 million for.
It's for damages and the loss.
It's damage, yeah. But what about the people that own the land in the area? Where's their money?
Part of the
Why don't you negotiate with them?
part of the claim is to return parcels of the land in the corridor area, and then council will have to determine how to best use that land.
Is there somewhere we can get outline of what's in that plan?
The original lawsuit, or what these elements include with the 45 million.
Yeah, because I think there's a lot more to it than that.
Can we use your also for suing?
To sue them, yeah.
Huh?
No.
You elected you with the...
Well, the government of Canada argues that each individual landowner received compensation for the loss of their land. The argument that we have put forward on behalf of everybody is that the government came in, made individual deals with people that lost land, but we are saying that they did not compensate the community as a whole.
That's right.
So that the damage is for the loss to everybody, not because the government has, said that we went in, we talked to landowners, we provided them with some sort of compensation. We said that doesn't matter because the land collectively belongs to the Mohawks of Akwesasne. That's what the claim is about, is the damage to all of us as a community as a whole.
Yeah, because there is a big question. When I put the People's Fire up at the crossroads, they said, you can't do that. I said, well, who owns the land? So I put the building up at the crossroads, and it sat there for a long time, years. Nobody touched it because Canada doesn't have documentation, proper documentation, to say that they actually appropriated that land. It doesn't matter who they paid off. It was done illegally.
Well, one of the reasons is being because we've alleged since 1967 that the expropriation was illegal, right? So we've asserted that it's ours.
I think you have a 10 times bigger claim.
Well, I mean, we've spent close to $5 million litigating this already. 1076, and I tell you that probably about 5 years ago, when we were just about preparing for trial, it was close to $700,000 a year we were spending just to prepare for trial. We anticipate a few $1 million to litigate this. The challenge though is that in court you either end up with something or you don't. And the other thing is that they won't return any land in court. So we were at the point where this has been dragging on since 1967. We approached the government and said, look, is there a way that we can resolve this? We went back and forth for 2 years. But I can tell you that if we go back to court, we're going to spend, we're going to top out at $10 million very soon. And at the end of the day, it's up to a man in a black robe of whether or not it was right or wrong, and he will determine how much money you get. So those are the risks. This is the same as the Dundee, though. The Dundee has been negotiated for 10 years now. The other option is to go to court, but they will not give you the ability to buy back 18,200 acres of land and turn it back to reserve. They will only give you cash. That's it in the court system. So when we take all of those options and weigh it out, these are this is what we're trying to accomplish is a deal that is good for the entire community. Mind you, these will all go to referendum. They're not. We're not saying right now we're signing it tomorrow. We will roll out the information and we'll have those wholesome discussions on what it is that we are accepting for the cash settlements, and it's both claims, the Dundee as well as the Seaway. Yes.
I was wondering about that. You mentioned earlier that expropriation was illegal. So won't that land still be ours?
We have always alleged it was illegally taken, right? Because we have always said that when the government took the land, they did not consider the collective of the Mohawks of Akwesasne. They went to individual people and got them to agree.
My mother said that her mother never got paid for any of that property. She never accepted any money from
Well, we know that every situation is different because there's that, and there's as well as the areas that where the land was taken away. Like that's the corridor. There's land that was taken away that people were compensated for, or may not have been. Right. So there's a lot of individual different areas.
Negotiate a lease.
Yeah. No. It's as we roll this out, we'll have to continue to have more dialogue on this. Yes.
As long as they keep your eyes covered up They're going to pull that over you all the time. If you keep saying they took the land, they didn't take the land nowhere. They made you believe they did. You've got to stop believing everything that they have to say. It's our land. We don't negotiate for it. All you have to do is make one phone call to Russia. Don't get it. I'm going to tell you something. The United States put a, what do you call it, on all Indians. If the land, they have to have first right of refusal to offer it to any other people. The United States put that right on the terms of conditions in a treaty that they recognize. Now, you talk about treaties. They're the ones that have to obey those treaties. Okay? They're the ones that have something to lose. They pulled the wool over our eyes so long that they got us saying, those landowners. They are not the landowners, they're the land squatters. And don't even call them land squatters either, because land squatters, they gave them rights. So be careful what you say in the future, okay, about these lands. Those lands are our children that are not here yet. It's our duty to retrieve those lands and occupy them back for our generations to come. We can do it, guys. Stop and cut those goddamn strings. The ones that are there dangling you, guys. Stop. Reality is, if they can educate you in a way to take you away from who you are as Oklahoma, not indigenous, Oklahoma. Yatato. That's what I was taught, and I know a lot of you were taught the same thing. Oklahoma. And it don't separate us. As soon as you start to say all these other terminologies, you start falling into their teachings, not ours. The thing now, we can go forward, but I get upset listening to a little bit of this, all this. How much money? How much money? And then all of a sudden, that money's not worth anything anymore. And where are we? Same place. Our people are diseased because we're talking about things and we're not looking at the real picture here. We are not looking at the real picture of what's happening to our youth. They're becoming lost, totally lost, because we are not doing what we're supposed to be doing. Land. We should not be fighting over land. We have to tell them that this is our land. We never gave this land to you. We allowed you to use some land. We allowed you to use our land. We didn't give it to you. We just allowed you to use it. Feed your children. Feed your families. As soon as we let them grow, then they start to fight at us. They came here in this village, and what they did in this village, we should always remember what they did. They never came after that. They never came in peace after that. They always came after what they could get. And they always target those people that have that understanding yet. You ain't even teaching your children the right way. You can talk to the old people in our language. It isn't what's being taught today. What our young people are getting is another culture altogether. Unless you take that even, it's all connected to the land. You have to go back to the land and start to teach the children the way it is. It's true. You know, I can fight you. I can fight you, but I don't want to fight you. I don't want to fight this cannabis thing. It's ridiculous. nature. And we're putting this as, it's so bad. Alcohol. Alcohol. We all used to love that alcohol. But some of us woke up and seen what was going to us. That is the beginning of our end. Alcohol. Because that's the weapon of choice of the non-native people to take what we had. Alcohol. We had a peaceful way of doing things, and it was with cannabis. Cannabis has been our life forever. It's something that's in our culture. It wasn't misused. But think about this, guys. Think about what you're doing with this land claims. Think about it, because, man, maybe even if you go through with this, the money you put on, I heard a thing on the radio, I read a thing on the paper about what should we do with the money. He made a suggestion. That suggestion should be taught to you already. That's something that we have to keep in mind of what will happen in these treaties. But maybe you can think about buying every family that wants to farm a new tractor, a new baler, a new hay thing, a new plow, everything that they can do to survive, because something's coming and we aren't going to survive. We ain't going to make it because we're not paying attention to the earth no more. We're all going to Twin Leaf and buying tractors, and even there 3 times a day. Nobody's in the garden no more. Those old tractors are buried in the dirt that they've been sitting so long. But that's what they did. Goes back to taking our land. They made you think that we can use a tractor now, everybody's going to go with this, and the hard work was going to end. It ended all right. It was too hard. Now I can't get my voice to do anything. Things is bad, boys. You know, this land claims. Go take our land back. Stanley Island. You remember Stanley Island? We went and took our land back. Loon Island. We went and took the land back. We didn't negotiate for the land. And you know something? You should rent those cabins out down here now. I was only 9 years old and I was on Stanley Island standing for the fight of our return of our islands. Hey, it's simple. But don't do it. Don't do it. Somebody might go to jail. I went to jail. I went to jail for taking back land over here which the white man said it was his. It wasn't his. And he found out that it wasn't his. Because he stopped paying the taxes, guess what? They foreclosed on him. Wasn't his asset, was it? I'm just saying, guys, I gotta go, but let's come to get our minds right. Think about it. Think about these young people. Make a stand. Make a stand. Never mind that court, Jim Ransom. Never mind them. We make the decisions. We make the laws. We all have to live here together. I'd rather fight as one and stand for our lands. I don't need nobody to tell me that the Nutfield tract is not ours. I don't need anybody to say that I can't go there. But I did go there. And I did confront them. And Ottawa told me that a band council chief down here in Akwesasne signed away the rights to the Nutfield tract for $20 million. Now, if there's any truth to that, these guys got to find that out. Because he asked the question, And we're not going to say no names. But I say, if I say Anataguero, only a few of you will know who I'm talking about. So, that land was signed away for $20 million. And who knew about that? I didn't sign it away. I didn't sign it away. I went there and I stopped that man over there that was cutting those maple trees that our people were tapping over there for centuries. But it was too late. I got there and the whole forest was cut down and they were harvesting those maple trees that were there since time immemorial. Who are you? Who are you? Well, I'm the Indian that owns this land. They took me to court. They tried to take me to court. Ottawa blocked them. They said, no, you're not going to touch this one. Not going to touch this one. See? Why? Because an Indian said, it's not their land, it's our land.
All right, Mr. Jock, thank you very much
Thank you.
for providing this insight. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier on in the update, we will continue to have community meetings with respect to the land claims, the Dundee as well as the Seaway. So I do want to move along. We do have 3 more items to get through. I apologize, we are a bit behind schedule. So I do want to ask Chief Lazor to give us an update on the Akwesasne election law. Oh, my apologies. Our government service manager, Chelsea, will provide us with an update on the Akwesasne election law.
My name is Chelsea Francis. I'm the Government Support Manager for Mohawk Government. I'm also a member of the Akwesasne Election Law Working Task Group. What we wanted to do tonight was just give everybody a really quick update on what the status was with the election law. As you may know, there was previously planned a special general meeting, and this meeting was canceled due to the community losses. So we wanted to make sure that we were, understanding and of what was going on in the community at the time. So what we want to give you guys an update on is just that right now we don't have a new date for the special general meeting, but it is going to be discussed and it will be set, and everybody will be notified of when that date is set for. The next update that we wanted to give was from the last general meeting. We had a question in regards to the preamble section of the election law. This section of the preamble specifically wasn't referencing the 2005 election law that is what we were proposing to amend. What it had in there was it was more of a reference to the 1994 law. We weren't specific enough, and what we wanted to do as a working task group was clarify that so that there was no confusion in which law was actually being amended. So it is the 2005 Akwesasne election law that is being amended. So what we're going to do is we're going to send out a new preamble with the correct election law that is being proposed to be amended. And in there, we're going to have a notice and an explanation of why that was, why we're fixing that. So that doesn't change anything with the law, but it does change just the correction in the preamble. So that's the only thing that we wanted to let you know about. And again, the only major change in the amendment process is the only change in the law is the amendment process, along with some grammatical corrections, updates in titles, spelling, grammar, and the vote is what completes the process. So this is only proposed, again, this is going back to the community at the special general meeting at a date yet to be determined, and the community will be the ones to approve or say no to the new proposed election law. Connie, did you have anything else you wanted to add? Or I think that was pretty much it. If I went fast enough.
No, that's great. Are there any questions on that? Yes.
If there's time, did she say there's still time for amendments?
No.
No, we're too far gone in the process for additional amendments.
Yeah, because my issue was that you now know who the people are that are in Cornwall that are members of this community.
Yeah.
And they should be eligible to vote in the elections.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we went through a process in which we were chastised from the beginning, from the process in which we used. There was some fundamentals that were proposed. One was the criteria for the candidates to be achieved. One was the interdistrict voting. One was raising the educational levels. There was a few other smaller ones. That was one of them, and we didn't. The committee felt that because some of the proposed amendments were not, community was not certain on certain areas, that we wouldn't put that forward at this time.
How many people are members of this community who live in Cornwall? You must know that number from the fuel assistance.
We have, I don't know the number offhand. We have an approximate, I think it was maybe 40.
47?
Yeah, 40, 47 thereabouts that apply. Now, I mean, there's probably more that haven't, so. Yes, sir.
The law, the way it's written right now, is law, right? It hasn't been, the new part hasn't been enacted, but say I wanted to get a petition signed with the 75 signatures needed to change an amendment, I think it's called,
yep,
for voting. You know how on the week before, like voter registration has to be completed by Thursday, and then the election is on Saturday. Yeah. The people, and I've seen it, they should have the right to walk into any voting booth anytime, you know what I mean? Like there shouldn't be a deadline on somebody who's eligible to vote because they didn't hit that deadline, because they're still, their voice should be heard, right? And a vote is their voice. So if I went and got the specific signatures to allow people to vote up right until Saturday morning when the vote starts, you can walk in with your status card and vote. I mean, that should be, okay, if I got the signatures, would it be accepted?
No. We would have to finish the process we started now. That would be accepted, but if you want it to be effective for the next general election, it will not. It's just because we're already in a process being used by the existing law, and that's by calling the election it's set in December. So you could do that process. It would not take effect, till the next election, 3 years from now. There's not enough time to be able to do that. If that came forward in the spring, then yeah, it could be possible. Yes. Any questions, comments? Okay, so as Chelsea has outlined, the amendments will go forward to a special general meeting. The only change that is being proposed is how the law will be amended next time around. And has a few grammatical error corrections, but all of the things that had been brought forward, such as the criminal reference check, the educational requirements, the ability to vote for another district, the ability for people not on reserve to vote, those are not going forward. None of the big changes that were proposed are going forward at this time. So it's only the amendment section will change in the law. So, thank you very much. Okay, so we have an update from Housing on some funding options. There was a request at one of our last meetings to provide the community with some information on funding that may be available for housing. I want to turn to Portfolio Chief Darrell.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Yeah, like the Grand Chief said, there was a request for the funding. As you know, last fall I reported that we signed on with First Nation Market Housing. With First Nation Market Housing, we have 16 banks that are signed on with them right now. We approached banks in the local area, which are the Bank of Montreal is on. We already have that agreement with them. We approached Peace Hill Trust, Case Populaire, there's 5 banks, CIBC, TB, we approached Scotiabank. So far, CIBC has jumped on board with First Nation Market Housing right now. We're waiting to hear back from the other banks. we're in the final draft of the policy that goes with First Nation Market. Hopefully, I anticipate it was going to be at council this March, but we're looking at probably the middle of April, that coming forward and getting approval by council to start working with First Nation Market. As is right now, we still have the Bank of Montreal, like I said, on board with us. There's still loans that can be, if you have your land, you still can approach Bank of Montreal and get a loan there. We also have the housing loan through MCA, which is a long process, tedious. It's not working for our community. We're looking at other options that service the community much better in a faster manner. There's a waiting list for our housing department loans, and right now we also have the RAP, which is ongoing. It's always been ongoing, and that's pretty much all the funding departments that we have coming on board with us from First Nation Market.
All right. Thank you very much. So that was an update on what is available for housing funding for community members. Okay, so we're going to move on to business from the floor. At this time, we will take anything that the community wants to address council with, questions, comments, statements. It is a bit late, so I do ask that you please keep your questions pointed and any statements brief, please. Go ahead. Yes.
Okay. I have a question, and this is something I brought up before. This is the first time I brought this up. As you know, there's a lot of projects that are happening on the reserve. I mean, people are always looking for little money here, little money there. You know, whether it's a big business or there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there trying to make ends meet. And I always had this question that OLG funding, which is under general partner in the Indian Act. General partner laid out that the reserves in Ontario receive so much. I think it's it must be population or whatever. But anyway, we get $4 million a year for OLG funding. So I looked under the Indian Act, and general partner looks and they're looking for community, it could be community development, I think it's economic development, health, education. There's all categories that people can access. I mean, I don't know if it's a band office that controls that $4 million from OLG, but anyway, you passed a resolution a while back and you outlined that all this money from Ontario, from OLG funding, from Casino Rama, is laid out in this category where the majority of all of it is in Quebec. It goes through, they even have the church down as a location. They have a lot of things that, see, we pay the insurance at the church, $6,000 a year. So my question is, you passed a resolution and you're only allowing $150,000 to be distributed to the community for community projects and accessibility to the community. So it leaves almost $4 million, you know, $380 million or whatever, that stays in there for the use of the council. And a lot of the projects, like I said, if you look at it, is outlined in Quebec, but they put Ontario on the side, if you see it. But anyway, my question is, why is it that you laid it out as being $150,000 with so many people that's trying to commit, produce jobs and build up economic development? So at $150,000, like, is this something that you don't have to go to the community and ask them, we're going to pass a resolution, we're going to put it down for $150,000? Because I asked this before, if you guys would consider taking that down and maybe raising it to $1 million. Instead of $150,000, if you raise it to $1 million, at least it can help more people out in the community. I've asked this twice, this is my third time, but I never get an answer why it's stuck at this $150,000. I think we should move more money so that more people can access it.
Yep. Anybody want to address that on the Finance Committee?
We can. As one of the negotiators for the original Casino Rama bill,
There's 5 criteria for this distribution.
That's right.
Currently, there's $2 million for the community for services that you don't have to pay for. You have a justice system that the community wanted from these general meetings, focus meetings. That's being paid for. When we were doing this negotiation, the chiefs in the north claimed that Akwesasne in Ontario has 1,500 people. That's it. They tried to separate us by bringing that provincial line in. And we fought that tooth and nail, ex-grand chief and the executive director. They wanted to separate us. We wouldn't allow it. Akwesasne is one community. It was recognized by the province as one community. The dollars that forthcame here, the first one was $9 million. And we had to convince council to take it at that time. But since then, throughout this whole process, it's been funding deficit areas.
That's my point. Like a lot of it is just returned right back to the council. It was $281,000 for government staff. When you look at all the things that are Ontario on the side, and Mohawk Council staff, it was a lot of things returned back to the council that should have been funded by the federal government.
Yep.
$607,000 was given to the Seaway claim. The church, like I said, $6,000 for insurance. It was all laid out in there. But my question is, I realize you got $9 million at first, and now you have 5 categories to lay out as far as casino $4 million funding. I'm just asking, why is it that we can't raise the community access to the fund? Why can't we raise that in the $150,000, which is not a lot of money? If you look at when you're building a business or trying to get people to work, is it possible that some way it could be looked at and raise that to $1 million?
When we had a settlement offer from OPG, you guys are sitting on $46 million. And in that, when that trust started working and started distributing the money, that a lot of these services that from the community were supposed to go in that direction. You want free services, then it's your money, you pay for it. My point is, with all of the presentations you've seen today, we're looking at close to $36 million coming this way, this year.
What's that for?
For our projects that we're working for the community. Now, my whole thing is that we have to consult with the community, take up that $7 million from the tobacco fund, put it back into this deficit to continue this, and then we can release these OLG dollars elsewhere where it's supposed to be, in the community. I agree with you. That's my, I've always said that. OLG dollars is earmarked for the community. But since...
well, see, Steve, that's what happens. If somebody says, I'm a language speaker and I want to excel.
Oh, absolutely.
Language, you know, I want to build tapes. I want to put the language at more use, build a better curriculum. And they do it. Let's say they do it out of their house. But they need some money to help them get going to...
When I first got here, $9 million, that's exactly what happened.
But is that laid out the 5 categories to the council? Or can it be still contributed?
The categories cannot be changed. That was negotiated. It cannot be changed. Those are, everybody signed off on it, including Mohawk Council back in 98, 99. So these dollars that are forthcoming here, we're trying to offset this by bringing more dollars in so we can make these decisions. When you bring up a point like that, I totally agree with you. You should have more dollars for the community, for access. Because you look around, you see the daily operations in Akwesasne. It's the same thing every day. People are struggling. And we don't want to see that either.
And I have one more question, if you don't mind. It's on the political service agreement. The political service agreement, I missed, they didn't have a focus meeting on there because the CEO was out. Something happened, somebody got sick. But I have a lot of questions on that, and he had a focus meeting. Is there going to be another one?
Yeah, there will be another one scheduled.
because there's a lot of questions we have as far as, because that's putting the chief and council in a different category. I'd like to know what the objective is and see, and I'm really concerned about the confidentiality when it comes to the oath, whether it be election law or whether it be the council to that political agreement. You know, that confidentiality is really, to me, is blowing the place apart for 2 years because we can't get answers. You know, it comes out later on and find out that I don't think.
Well, I write reports every month, and in fact, I probably have about 7 years of them. So,
well, you know
what's in there.
You know what I mean? I mean, Dry-Wind Holding was one of them. That shouldn't be confidential. The chief shouldn't have that responsibility.
Chelsea, do you want to address the political service agreement?
Sure. So we actually had 2 meetings that we did hold. Nobody showed up. We didn't get anybody that attended. The 3rd meeting that we ended up canceling, we are going to be rescheduling that. That is going to be announced to the community in a timely fashion. There's going to be lots of time for everybody to know. We are looking at other options on how to reach out to the community and get the discussion going. One of the questions that you had about confidentiality, that's not going to change. The confidentiality of the chiefs that they're held to right now is going to be maintained in the political service agreement. So that part's not going to change. The only part that's really going to be looked at and given the question to the community on is how they're paid. Right now it's the hourly salary, but what's being proposed is just being put on a flat salary. But those are some of the things that we can talk about at our next focus meeting.
Is that going to be on the island?
I believe it will be.
Because that's the one you canceled.
Yeah. So that's where we'll have it. And then the next step after that, what we're hoping to do is gather a group of community members who are interested in working on this document. Because what we're providing is just a framework. It's just the base, and we want the community to help us build that up into what is acceptable for the community. And that was a part of council's decision to say, we need to hear back from the community on this document, because if not, it would be self-serving for them. So this is why we're going through the focus meetings, and we'd like to put together a sort of working task group from the community members.
Okay.
Does that?
All right. Is there any other things from the business from the floor before I formalize the meeting? Okay, so I do have a resolution that I need to read for the record. So the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne accepts and approves the general meeting minutes of March 1st, 2018. Could I have a mover, please? Moved by Steve, seconded by April. Discussion on the resolution.
Can I have your read who was in attendance?
So the chiefs in attendance were myself, Dennis, Ryan, Connie, Darryl, Karen, Louise, Tim, Troy, and Vince. So the absents were April, Joe, and Steve. Further discussion on the resolution? Questions been called on the resolution. All in favor of the resolution? Any against the resolution? There's none against the resolution. We just carry. All right, so our next general meeting will be held in Akwesasne on April 26th at 6 p.m. The district meetings will be held on April 9th for Akwesasne, April 9th for Gawanoga, and April 16th for Ganadago. On behalf of council, I want to thank everyone for coming out this evening, and we hopefully will see you next month. Thank you.